This is The Comics Alternative, episode 295, a look at the October Previews catalog. Hello, and welcome to another episode of The Comics Alternative. I'm Derek.
And I'm Sterg, and we're two guys with PhDs talking about comics.
And it's the first week of October, and that must mean it's time for our next look at the current Previews catalog. But before we get to that, we want to let all of you know that this episode of The Comics Alternative is brought to you by those great folks at Discount Comic Book Service. Go to their website, dcbservice.com, for all of your comics pre-ordering needs. There, you're going to find all DC, Marvel, Image, and Dark Horse titles at 40% off of the cover price if you pre-order. For all of the other publishers, you'll find that those discounts can be anywhere from 20 to 35% off of the cover price. And every single month, you're going to find some unbelievable specials. Sometimes those specials could be as much as 45% off of the cover price. Sometimes 50% off the cover, but occasionally you can find discounts that are even more impressive than that.
Yeah, and the specials for October aren't up just yet, but I was tooling around, and because it's October and Halloween's around the corner, I found a trade paperback of Witches with a Y by Scott Snyder and Jock, with a DCBS exclusive cover by Jock, for 40% off cover price, and that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that series when it came out a while back, and read that. That'll definitely be something to put you in the Halloween spirit. But you know, whatever kind of comic, whatever kind of genre you enjoy consuming, you'll find it at wonderful discounts at Discount Comic Book Service. Go to dcbservice.com. They will take care of all of your comics pre-ordering needs. And after you do get your titles there, please be sure to send them an email and tell them that the two guys with PhDs sent you.
That's right.
So, Sterg, this is our October Previews show, and it's important that, this is your very first Previews episode.
And I have to...
There you go. I wanted to announce that with a lot of fanfare.
Wow, that's impressive. I'm super excited. And I have to tell you a horrible thing, that I don't think I've read previews in maybe 15 years until this week. So I'm excited to jump back into it.
Yeah, it is fun. As we've said often on the show, it's like those old Sears catalogs that you would get toward the end of the year. You know, what would they call it? The wish book.
Mm-hmm.
And so, as a kid, I remember going through the Sears catalog, saying to myself, "Ooh, I want this, or I'd like that," and maybe one or two things I may get for Christmas. But it was a wish list, right? It wasn't a "I'm definitely going to get it" list.
Oh no, there were all kinds of wonderful toys and things. I remember giant play sets and all kinds of gizmos that I never got but always wanted.
Mm-hmm. So
I did get a boombox. That was really nice.
Oh wow! So yeah, and that's kind of like the Previews catalog. I mean, a lot of the things that I know that I may bring up, I won't necessarily get for, I don't know, any number of reasons. Maybe I can't afford it. Maybe it's something that I think our listeners may appreciate, but I don't think I want to get it. But it is something like a wish list.
I think the same thing. I have a whole shelf full of books. I'm like, I'm going to read all of those one day, and this is just going to help me add to it.
Well, let's go ahead and plunge into the October Previews catalog. And, before we get to the solicitations proper, I want to look a little bit at the offerings for this year's Halloween Comic Fest, which is going to be taking place in some, not all, comic shops on October 27th. Now, do you have a local shop that celebrates Halloween Comic Fest? Because in many ways, it's kind of a mini free comic book day.
There is. I thought the same thing. I saw it. Well, in Knoxville, I'm kind of lucky. There are about 4 or 5 shops, and the one I regularly go to actually has it posted up in his window pretty prominently. So I knew about it a couple of weeks ago. So I'm excited.
So are you going to go to the shop on the 27th?
Yeah. I'm going to go check it out. I might even bring I got a little 3-year-old. He's good in the comic shop. The 1-year-old is not too much. He wants to grab everything. But the 3-year-old, yeah, and that's the Comic Exchange in Knoxville. That's where I go. I don't know if they're going to send me something now. That would be nice.
That would be cool, yeah. I don't know if Heroes Aren't Hard to Find does Halloween Comic Fest. I would guess that they do, but in fact, today I sent some of the people there an email asking, do you do anything on the 27th for Halloween Comic Fest? And if they do, then I think it'd be nice to go there, kind of like I've done on Free Comic Book Day, and talk with customers about the kind of horror or Halloween seasonal titles that they may be into. Now, in this month's catalog, and we've seen this the past couple of months, right? A listing of various titles that'll be coming out for the 2018 Halloween Comic Fest. But in the October catalog, the listing begins on page 30. And I don't know if there are any Halloween Comic Fest titles that particularly appeal to you. Are there?
I have been reading that Jughead the Hunger book, actually. So there's a special edition of that I see. But I already have that. I just don't have that special edition. So I might check that out. It's I don't know if you've read. I have a strange. Well, Archie was a big presence when I was a kid. So in my house, and we had a lot of Archies, and I've been into those weird horror books that they've been putting out lately, like Afterlife with Archie. Yeah.
And, I enjoyed those as well.
They just don't come out very frequently. Well, Jughead the Hunger comes out pretty frequently.
Well, the thing that I noticed about not only this year, but previous years with Halloween Comic Fest and the free comics that they give out, is that unlike Free Comic Book Day, the vast majority of the offerings for Halloween Comic Fest are things that have been out for 1, 2, or more years, like The Hunger, or like, let's say, A Walk Through Hell, which is an Aftershock offering. And, Walk Through Hell's not quite been a year, but that first issue's been out for quite a long time. The only thing that strikes me that seems Halloween-ish and new is Viz's offering of Frankenstein Junji Ito Story Collection Sampler. Because that's a new book that's coming out this month, Frankenstein Junji Ito stories. But they have a sampler here, and so that's new. And then some of these titles seem to have nothing whatsoever to do with Halloween or horror, like Marvel, they're offering Thor #1 and also Miss Marvel #1. And, more power to them. It's just, some of that stuff's been around for quite a while. Halloween, I don't know. Kodansha, Battle Angel Alita Homecoming. Now, I know that that's a relatively recent title that is, I think, going to be coming out from Kodansha. But, again, what does it have to do with Halloween? I don't know.
I think that's got more to do with the fact that there's a movie coming soon.
Yeah. And if I'm not mistaken, I think this Homecoming may be stories based in the world of Battle Angel Alita by other creators. Maybe I'm wrong there, but I remember something like that being solicited not too long ago. So, kind of like Free Comic Book Day, there is a different approach to what different publishers are offering.
I mean, I will say for the Marvels, I'm kind of glad to see the Superior Spider-Man come #1 reissued, because I actually like that series a lot, and it was very short-lived. So I don't know, maybe if that fires up some people reading that, it was kind of an unexpected surprise to me. I don't know if you ever read that one.
No, I didn't. I just didn't get around to it.
That's where Dr. Octopus becomes Spider-Man for a while, and interesting results.
I remember hearing a lot of really good things about it. I That's, again, one of those series that I intended to get around to at some point, but it's been, 3 or 4 years now since we've had that, and I just, again, have not gotten around to it.
Hey, if I had $1 for every time I said that right lately with books I should be reading or want to read.
Okay, but if we want to jump into the catalog proper and begin mentioning things that may strike our fancy, let's start in the image section. And I think both you and I begin on page 40 with image with Die number 1, right?
That's correct.
Yeah, now this is going to be written by Kieran Gillen with art by Stephanie Hans. What was it about this title or the solicit or the art that leapt up at you?
Well, it's a combination of things, really. I really like Kieran Gillen's writing, and the fact that this is the team that worked on The Wicked and the Divine, which is a series I liked, or it's ongoing. I've not read, like I said, I've read the first 2 trades, but I like the writer and I like the artist very much, and the concept is pretty interesting. I mean, it's basically about role-playing game. A group of role-playing game folks who disappear for a while and then reappear, and then it seems like 15 years or 20 years later, something that perhaps they dealt with in the past comes back and they have to deal with it. It's just very intriguing to me. It's kind of like a weird D&D version of Nightmare on Elm Street, but with creators that do really interesting things.
Right. And they're describing this in the solicit as a goth Jumanji. And I can see the Jumanji angle coming across. But I tell you, in reading the solicit, I was also thinking of Stephen King's It.
Oh, yeah.
Now, granted, that doesn't have anything to do with, at least, games proper. But you have a similar phenomena in that a group of kids experience something quite significant. And then years later, as adults, the people get together because they still haven't been able to deal with or process through everything. So, the It stuff, I wasn't a big fan of Jumanji, but It, yeah, definitely. So that got my attention. And the art, we get, 3 pages, I think, of sample art, and it looks good.
Yeah, and it's intriguing to me, and this is a horrible thing I'm going to tell you, but Die is a hilarious pun.
Yeah, it is. It is.
The fact that there's the role-playing die, and then it's like the murder die. I mean, I would buy a book just for that, which is a horrible thing to admit.
Well, that's now the second title that Image will be coming out with that has the word die in the title, because we don't see it solicited, but there is Kirkman's Die, Die, Die.
Oh, that's right.
And that's one of those interesting experiments in that they're including as many issues of Die, Die, Die as retailers order. Oh God, what is that recent title that Kirkman's doing?
Is that Outcast?
No, it's not Outcast. It's the one a little more recent. It's been the past 6-8 months. It's escaping me right now. But anyway, it's something that, I see in my shop, but we don't see listed in the Previews catalog.
Is it Oblivion song?
Yes, that's it. I think that's it.
That's
now,
the one.
So this is a new number 1 for a new series. And one of the things you can always count on with Image is they have, quite a variety of number 1s, some of which I'm interested in, others, they don't really strike my fancy. Another number 1 that might be good, I don't know, it's on page 44 of the catalog, and this is Mark Miller and Raphael Albuquerque's Prodigy. And this is the first of a 6-issue miniseries. And, this is one of the things that Mark Miller does, is he comes up with these miniseries, and he's just kind of like a story idea factory.
Oh, yeah.
That he gets these things out there. Then if he can do something with these properties, maybe, spin it off into some kind of maybe Netflix series or film or what have you, then, it's a way for him to really cash in. But this is, I think, the next idea that he's come up with. And the solicit reads, Edison Crane's not content being the world's smartest man and most successful businessman. His brilliant mind needs to be constantly challenged. He's a Nobel Prize winning scientist, genius composer, Olympic athlete, an expert in the occult, and now international governments are calling on him to fix problems they just can't handle. So it's called an action-packed international adventure that pits the world's most brilliant billionaire against terrifying forces of darkness. So
that's a whole lot going on.
Yeah, it is. And I don't know. I mean, sometimes I feel that Miller's work is fun and I enjoy it. Other times, I don't know. I could take or leave. It's not bad, but it just doesn't really hit me. I think Huck, which came out a couple of years ago, was okay. I appreciated more MPH, which I think came out before that. And so that was a interesting miniseries.
He's one of those ones, like you said, he leaves me hot or cold. There's times I really like him, and I like his point of view and kind of the way he makes characters, like their affect, their attitude, maybe. But to me, he's almost one of those creators that, or as a writer, he's more like an attitude. Like, I think that's what he puts out more than he puts out. Like, the stories are always, at the very worst, they're competent and they're enjoyable. But sometimes he puts together something and it's great. But I think it's kind of like you said, he puts out so much that he hits occasionally. But most of the time it's just kind of okay. It just seems to me, like you said, like something that it's almost like content for a series or a TV show. And maybe it'll come out right with the right casting or something like that. Sometimes the series just leave me a little bit cold.
Yeah. And that's why the reason that I wanted to highlight this is not so much for the fact that Miller, this is a new title of his, but Raphael Albuquerque.
I love his art too.
I really do enjoy. So I think it's for that reason that I wanted to point this out, and I'm willing to give it a try. And also, that's a similar reason why I am mentioning my next pick, and this is on page 48 of the catalog. This is Hardcore #1, written by Andy Diggle with art by Alessandro Vitti and Adriano Lucas. The concept seems okay, and as they tell us in the solicit, this is from the creative minds of Robert Kirkman and Mark Silvestri. And the thing about Kirkman, I don't know. I think I like Kirkman well enough. There's a part of me that wonders if he is a little overrated because of the success of The Walking Dead. I don't know. Right. But the thing that will get me to read possibly Hardcore #1 is Andy Diggle.
Right.
Because I really do enjoy his writing, especially when it comes to detective or noir or even espionage narratives. And in fact, just recently, Gwen and I did an episode on the James Bond franchise from Dynamite, and Diggle had a couple of titles there that I thought were absolutely phenomenal.
Sure. And I remember his work on the Loser series. I think those were Vertigo books, and those were great.
Yeah.
I mean, those were they're a little bit dated now, but I really enjoyed those. Yeah, the series, the solicit, really weird. Like you said, it stood out to me in that it was created by people who aren't doing the book, which I thought was really funny.
Yeah, I guess they came up with the concept, and then Andy Diggle did the, trench kind of writing. He's right there in the midst of things and getting his hands dirty. But yeah, the solicit says, imagine being able to take over the body of anyone on Earth. Sound crazy? Not for Agent Drake and the Hardcore program. They can turn any person into a human drone to get to targets that normal soldiers can't. And so that sets up, I guess, enough of a premise to wrap your brain around. But, I may give that a try. It sounded interesting. Yeah,
it does. It's a little Quantum Leap-ish for me.
Yeah, that's right. I didn't even think of Quantum Leap, but that does come to mind now that you mention it.
But it's more directed, not random.
I think you have something on page 60, but before we get there, I actually have something before that on page 55. And this is, I guess, a new edition of something that has been out for a while, but I wasn't aware of it. I didn't read this. And this is Doug Tenapel's Creature Tech. And this apparently originally came out, or at least I think the first edition came out with Top Shelf in 2003, right. And then Image came out with their own edition in 2010. Now we have a brand new edition, and it's in color. That's going to be coming out in December. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. Did you know about Creature Tech?
I didn't know. Well, I haven't read this one. There was a time when I was really into reading his books. I think it started with Ghostopolis, and this jumped out at me. But then I thought, I don't remember if from what I remember, this used to be in my comic shop, and I flipped it a couple times, and it just didn't seem like it held together the way I wanted it to. But I really liked Ghostopolis, and I think the book after that was something about an island, which I don't remember. But he's one of those creators, Tenaple, that I think he's another one for me. He's definitely got a point of view, and when he's on, he's very much on. It's just sometimes it doesn't work for me, and that's why I didn't highlight that one. Although, I mean, it's an intriguing book, and I like the size of it. It's a 6x9. I'm looking at it, so it's one of those slightly smaller than a typical trade paperback. Probably nice, aiming for maybe a younger audience. Because I know that his Ghostopolis book, that was, I think Scholastic put that out, I want to say. And that one was in a lot of schools, from what I know. It was one of those book club books that, kind of like the previews for kids that you get every month, those little Scholastic readers that you could order things. Yeah. This was one of those titles, or at least Ghostopolis was one of those titles. So I'm kind of intrigued to see it in this format. And I might check it out, actually, because it was a book that I looked at a bunch, and I only really flipped it. So maybe I need to take a look at it and see if I'm into it. It's definitely got a cool cover.
So after that, you go to page 60 for, speaking of trade paperbacks, one from Joe Keating and Brett Blevins.
That's right. That is, let me get there. Stellar. And that's a series it's a sci-fi series. And this is, it collects the first 6 issues. Image is really good about collecting their at least, everything they collect, but making sure that these books get put together. Joe Keating is one of those people that I really enjoy his books, but he's also one of those ones that's, I'm not going to say hit or miss, but his hits are very, very good. I really liked his Glory book. I liked, what was that wrestling book he did? It was called Ringside.
Ringside, yeah.
And I really liked that. But really what intrigued me, I like him as a writer for the most part, but I don't think I've seen Brett Blevins do any comics work in a very long time. And as far as I knew, he was teaching comics at, I don't know if he was up in New Hampshire. He was somewhere up in New Hampshire. I don't think he was at the Center for Comic Studies, but he was somewhere teaching comics.
Well, that's in Vermont, yeah.
Yeah, Vermont, sorry. I used to teach in New Hampshire, right close to that. But I'm more intrigued by the artwork just because he's one of those ones that for a very long time, I always thought he was masterful, and I loved how he drew things. I mean, he did a lot of work at Marvel from what I remember, New Mutants and Cloak and Dagger and things like that. And I really loved his artwork, and I thought he was one of those underappreciated artists that I really looked forward to seeing his style. And it just seemed like after a while, he kind of got overshadowed by all those Image type people, and he just kind of faded out. So I'm kind of intrigued by that. And I mean, the solicit says Stellar was taken as a child and transformed into the ultimate weapon, one that would end an intergalactic war. She succeeded at everything except finding peace. And now she's a bounty hunter, and she's out on I don't know. It just sounds intriguing to me. I'm a sucker for a sci-fi book like this, where it's like a different universe and somebody's just out there on their own trying to find their way. It's almost like a weird cowboy Western out in space.
Now, we didn't talk about Stellar #1 on the regular review show when it came out, but I think, if I'm not mistaken, I did discuss it briefly on an on-location show that I did earlier this year at Heroes Aren't Hard to Find. Mm-hmm. I liked that first issue well enough, but I didn't go on to read the rest of the series. Mm-hmm. And it's not that I didn't want to read the rest of the series. It's primarily a matter of time. And also there was really nothing about that first issue that slapped me in the face and got my attention in a way that I said, oh, I absolutely have to keep up with this. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I liked it well enough, but apparently not well enough to continue with it. So now we have the trade out. And in fact, I noticed that there are a lot of trades that are being solicited in Image. But then again, they do so many series.
Mm-hmm. That's true. That's true. And that's one of the next things that I saw, if you want to talk about, on page 62. There is not just one trade, not two, but 5 trades of Street Angel. It's the Power Pack Pentathlon hardcover bundle, which I don't know have you ever read any of the Street Angel comics?
Yeah, I have. And I'm glad to see this.
Mm-hmm.
On the one hand, I think it would be a great way for people to catch up with Street Angel if they haven't been reading it since Image has been putting out these larger sized hardbound editions. Because, Street Angel began with Top Shelf.
Right.
And we even had Jim Rugg on the show a few years ago to talk about a collection that Top Shelf had put out of Street Angel. But I'm glad to see all of these collected now or bundled together. The thing is, I've been getting these individually. Right.
And that's one of the things, too, I would say. This is one of those series that I have multiple versions of because I have some of I actually have a lot of the initial trades, and they're in a much smaller format, like you said. I even have a bunch of the mini comics because Jim Rugg's one of those guys that he goes to Heroes Con pretty consistently, and I always hit him up and buy things from him. But I like the format of these. Like you said, they're oversized, they're hardcover. They're not the longest comics in the world. I think they're more like, I would say something like 40, 50 pages long.
Yeah, like European album size almost.
Exactly. But to me, that's what sells them. That's that format. I love his artwork, and they're fun stories to me. They're adventure stories with a little bit of heart. And I mean, the last couple, I think, are ones that are more original. I think they were mini comic format first. I watch him online, actually. I read a lot of his things. I follow his process pages and things like that. So I just like the format, and it's one of those things that, for people who hadn't read this series, like you said, I think this is one of those ones that it's attractive in a lot of different ways.
Now, I don't have anything else in the Image section. I mean, there are other things that I, may or may not get that are like number 2 or 3 issues or trades or whatever. But in terms of new series or number 1 issues or even original graphic novels, what have you, that's all I have in Image. But I think you may have a few other things to highlight.
I have a couple things. I mean, it's like you say, they're just continuing issues in the series. I would say, I know that we reviewed Cemetery Beach a couple weeks ago, and I really like that series, and issue 4 is in here. One of the ones that jumped out to me is actually on page 63, though, right after that Street Angel. And that's something that, reading through previews, I guess now, I don't know, I feel like I've been under a rock or something. Like I don't realize things are out. And Keith Giffen is one of my favorite creators, and he's writing a series for Image called Auntie Agatha's Home for Wayward Rabbits. And I hadn't read issue 1, but issue 2 is here. And that's something that I definitely would pick up just on his name alone, because he's one of my all-time favorite creators. And so I would check it out. It looks like a very strange thing because I don't know the setup. But the description of this, and it says it's a humor title, which is appropriate for what he does. But it says that the Agatha house is under attack by 2 goons named Naomi and Rachel, which Gooms would be named Naomi and Raquel, right? Not Rachel. Their assignment is to get Agatha to sign over her estate, whether she likes it or not. Sawyer seeks the help of newly arrived Japanese exchange rabbit, Ashoka, to even out the odds. So there's a whole lot going on, even in that description, that intrigued me. Exchange rabbits, that's something that I'd never think of.
Well, you say you haven't read the first issue. That won't be coming out until next month. Or I think November, because issue number 1, I remember Gwen and I, when we did the September preview show, I think both of us noted this one, or we said something about it. So that means if it was solicited in September, then November is when the first issue will come out.
Yeah, so that's one that jumped out at me. And I know you guys both talked about Bitterroot, I think, as well. That's a series that was on page 64.
Right.
I really like that creative team of David F. Walker, and I know there's another writer named Chuck Brown, and Sanford Green is doing the inside art. And I really love their Power Man and Iron Fist series they did for Marvel a few years ago. I think they're a really excellent team in terms of just the combination of story and art. And I'm very interested in this too. Just jumped out at me. But I know it's something else you had talked about. And is there anything else in Image? We also, some other things. There's an issue that just came out this week from a series called, where did I just jump by it? Man-Eaters by Chelsea Kane.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you talked about that in the past.
Well, I remember when that was solicited, we did mention Man-Eaters as something to look forward to. Now, interestingly enough, and apparently you haven't listened to the latest On Location episode that went up on Friday, in fact, where Mike Cobry and I go into Heroes on Hard to Find and talk. Mike primarily about mainstream stuff, me about the alternative or indie markets. But I did discuss Man-Eaters #1. And I wasn't entirely taken by the first issue.
Right.
I think the concept is interesting, and the message that is embedded in Kane's narrative is a strong one and resonates. It's just that with that first issue, I remember what I said at the shop was I felt that enough questions weren't answered in that first issue on a narrative level. So, for instance, and this is something we've talked about quite a number of times on the Comics Alternative, when it comes to a #1 issue, I mean, what makes a successful #1 issue? Right. And I think that, for me, there have to be questions once you get to the end of a first issue of a new series or miniseries. However, it has to be the right kind of questions. So if I get to the end of a #1 issue and I have little clue what the premise is or what's going on, or things aren't fleshed out what I feel adequately well enough, then it doesn't really seem to me to work as a successful #1 issue. On the other hand, if I get a sense of the premise, but nonetheless, there are mysteries or questions or ambiguity at the end that have me wanting to read more, like get that second and third issue and see what happens, then that's a good thing. But when I got to the end of Man-Eaters, and who knows, maybe if I go back to reread it, I'll feel differently. When I got to the end of it, I could see thematically where Kane was going and what she was attempting to do. What I had a problem with was on the storytelling or on the narrative level, because they were, I think that the elements of establishing a premise with the #1 issue was rather sparse.
Right.
And I was expecting more. Now, maybe that's a problem with me and my expectations, and I need to readjust. But again, my experience in reading Man-Eaters #1, interesting, but I didn't necessarily feel compelled to make an effort to read subsequent issues. Maybe wait for the trade. Who knows?
That might be one of those ones. It just occurred to me reading this that I should know, or I should have known this was coming out. The cover really didn't. The issue 1 cover, I think it's just like a bunch of cat paws up in the air. Didn't really strike me, but it didn't tell me anything about what was inside. That was the thing, I think, that why I saw it in the comic shop, but I didn't pull it up. But now reading what's in it, I actually need to go back and find it. So I'm going to give it a shot and see, and I'll let you know. We'll talk about it.
Okay. Do you have anything else on Image?
There's some ongoing things on page. Just a series I read regularly on page 87 is Unnatural, and I don't know if y'all have talked about that in the past. It's one of those books that I bought it because I follow the artist. What's the artist on? I follow her on Instagram actually, which is I'm in the present now. Right.
In fact, Paul and I did discuss Unnatural #1, and both of us especially me, I think, really liked it. I think Paul liked it well enough, but I was a little more enthusiastic about it. But that's one of those titles that, I read the first issue and I got the first issue. I haven't gotten subsequent issues because I'm waiting for the collection to come out. And because this originally appeared in Italian,
right,
I'm wondering if they're going to release it as, let's say, a European album size.
Oh, that'd be cool. That's one of the ones, because Mirka and Andolfo, that's the creator. And I mean, they're cheesecakey covers, but the insides, I was struck by the character work, and I really enjoy that series.
Right, exactly. I mean, and there is something rather, let's say, erotic about the art, especially on the covers. But the covers, Andolfo is, trying to get, as any creator would, the buyer's attention. But this is something that Paul and I discussed when we were looking at Unnatural #1, is that the sexuality and the eroticism in the story makes sense because it's not as if the creator is doing it for purely cheesecake reasons. Right. And again, I don't necessarily have anything against cheesecake art. It could be, and I understand people who really are turned off by this. It can be exploitive, definitely.
Right.
The whole male gaze thing. However, it seems that Andolfo is making a statement about body image.
Right.
In that title, at least with that #1 issue. So I'm waiting for the trade to come out.
Well, I've been reading it, and I'll tell you, it's been good, consistently good. So maybe we should move on.
To Dark Horse?
Yeah, sure. Let's do that.
Yeah, and I think you and I both start at the same place in Dark Horse, don't we, on page 98?
That's right, with LaGuardia #1, which is here, you go ahead.
No, I was going to say, this is by, and I'm sure I'm going to butcher the writer's name at least, Nedi Okorafor. Nnedi is the first name, and then Okorafor is the writer, and then Tana Ford is the artist. And this is a new title in the Berger Books imprint of Dark Horse. So I think it's the fact that this was a Berger book made me definitely pay attention to it. But then I read the solicit, and that got my attention even more.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Okorafor. That's going to be my jump at it.
Nedi Okorafor.
And that was kind of the hook for me too. I've been intrigued by these Berger book titles, and I really enjoyed listening to that interview you did with Karen Berger. Was that last year?
Yeah, it was the beginning of this year, though. Yeah,
the beginning of this year. See, time is not a concept I'm familiar with. It's just just in the past. But I really enjoyed listening to her. I mean, she's one of those, like you all went over. I mean, she's like a monumental figure in comics, period. At least American comics. And that she's taking chances and doing books that are like in the style of the classic kind of Vertigo books, like taking chances and pushing kind of the boundaries, really stood out to me. And, I know that sometimes with contemporary comics, there's that it can seem like a gimmick, like you go out and get the legitimate science fiction fantasy writer and get them to write comics. But to me, this seems more like somebody who's a fan of comics and a fan of sci-fi getting a chance to write and collaborate on a quality title. It just seemed really interesting to me. In the solicit, it says it's set in an alternative world where aliens have come to Earth and integrated with society. LaGuardia revolves around a pregnant Nigerian-American doctor. Future, Noafor. I'm going to butcher these names too. Chukwubuka. Going that way. Who has just returned to New York City under mysterious conditions. After smuggling in an illegal alien plant named Let Me Live, which is a good name for a plant, through LaGuardia International and Interstellar Airport's customs and security, she arrives at her grandmother's tenement, the New Hope Apartments in the South Bronx. This just seems like a weird, wild book.
Right. And they call this, and apparently this is going to be on the cover because it's on the cover image here, a very modern story of immigration. And, that's the other reason that I'm particularly interested in this title, not just because it's part of the Burger Books imprint, the latest edition, but it has something to do with issues of immigration. I noticed that even in this catalog, and I'm sure that this topic will come up 2 or 3 other times in our discussion today, that there are more and more narratives in comics that look at the immigration situation that we have right now. And I remember back in June, we saw a solicit for a book that Abrams is putting out, Undocumented, A Worker's Fight. And so, I mean, it just seems to me that over the past several months, there has been more attention within the medium, comics medium, paid to this problem of immigration, current politics especially.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I've noticed too, across the board. I think it's definitely an issue, like you said, where this topic is dominating the current events, is dominating the contemporary kind of thinking, and I love to see it wrestled with here in this format and this milieu. I just really like what I've seen so far. I mean, there's a preview page, and it just seems like a weird book, but weird in a good way. Like, I think the best kinds of science fiction, I mean, it comments on, our life and condition, and puts it in casts it in a strange way that we don't think about things typically. And this definitely seems, I mean, there's spooky plant people that look kind of like, I don't know, like Cthulhu plant, maybe. A lot of vines.
Well, interesting that you should reference Cthulhu, because I think both of us in the Dark Horse section next go to page 101, which is Black Hammer, Cthu-Louise. Written by Jeff Lemire with art by Emmie-X. So this is yet another title in the ever-expanding Black Hammer universe from Jeff Lemire. And here we have Emmie-X returning to work in the Black Hammer universe. And I really do enjoy her work. And, she's worked with Jeff Lemire, of course, before.
Right.
And this just seems fun. It says, from the pages of Sherlock Frankenstein comes this horrific tale of Lovecraftian teenage angst. Spawned by the emissary of a Cthulhu god, Cthu-Louise, and it's a young girl who has the face of a Cthulhu. But, with Emmie-X's art especially, looks cute, not horrific. Cthu-Louise struggles and is teased at school due to her monstrous appearance. Finally, fed up with the bullying and abuse, she decides she will do anything to make herself normal. So this looks fun. Of the Black Hammer material that I've read, I enjoy it. I'm someone who has read, I think, the first volume of Black Hammer and then stopped because I wanted to take in everything once it had been collected in deluxe editions. So I was holding out for that. And I think a couple of months ago, there was a solicit for the first deluxe edition of the Black Hammer stories. And so I've got that on order.
Yeah, I've read the first 2 trades, and then I've read I guess it's 3 trades, because then I read the Sherlock Frankenstein trade recently. I really Lemire, he's one of those writers that I don't know how he writes. I don't know when he sleeps.
Yeah.
Because it seems like he's got about 10 series and 2 original graphic novels any given month.
Yeah.
But it's just, I don't know what he doesn't do well. He does slice of life stuff. He does very mundane topics well. He does weird otherworldly animals or animal people. He does weird superheroes. He does sci-fi. I'm just looking forward. I've been consistently impressed with the series. It's been one of my favorite comics too. Like, I buy a lot of trades, and sometimes they end up on shelves even if I'm into the series. And so this is one of the ones that I've been keeping up with almost as they get published. So I'm excited. I'm just excited to look at this book. It's even the preview pages are just, you don't see little Cthulhu's brushing their teeth very often.
Okay, so where do you go next in Dark Horse?
I went next to page
107.
107, Mind Management, Omnibus. Speaking of omnibuses, Omnibuy. Mind Management is one of my favorite series ever. And I don't have the Omnibuy. I have actually the individual trades, And Matt Kindt is another one of those writers that him and Lemire are kind of, to me, kindred spirits. And they both work for Valiant too, which maybe puts them together. He's another one that just seems to have all these kinds of series going.
And they're also good friends.
Yes, that's part of it too. So to me, but he's got a kind of different sensibility. He's kind of more like an X-Files type person, like the periphery of what's normal and what's supernatural or what's paranormal and how these
There's
things.
There's something conspiratorial almost in terms of Matt Kindt's narratives, even when he's not dealing with things kind of like espionage and mind management or Department H. I think we saw something semi-conspiratorial going on in that Boom Studios series that he did with Tyler Jenkins not too long ago, and that was Grass Kings. And, also with Tyler Jenkins, the new series, Black Badge. I mean, there is something kind of undercover, even conspiratorial going on with that as well. I'm glad that you linked Lemire and Kindt, because I'm like you, I see the two together. And in fact, last year at our end of the year best of 2017 episode, one of my favorites, I kind of fudged, because, normally we pick 10 outstanding titles, not necessarily in any kind of order of which one we like better. But I guess I ultimately picked 11 because I grouped Grass Kings and Royal City together, because I thought that both of those series were doing similar things. But the thing about the mind management omnibus, I'm not going to get this, but I think it's worth pointing out that this is something that people should get, especially if they're not familiar with mind management, unfortunately. I'm like you. I got the collections as they came out, and you called them trades. I don't know what to call them, because this is what Matt Kindt tends to do. He did the same thing with Department H and also with Grass Kings over at Boom Studios, is that when he collects a volume of whatever title that he's working at, more times than not, they're in hardcover editions. And so I have all the hardcover collections of mind management. However, this omnibus, which collects the first two hardbound collections, is actually paperback, and it's only $24.99, and I'm sure at DCB service you can get it for a significant discount. I mean, that's a great price for about 400 or 400 and some pages that brings together those first two collections. So if you never got on the mind management bandwagon, then this is an affordable and excellent opportunity to do so.
And like you said, it's one of those things that I saw him, he's at Heroes Con frequently as well. And I saw him a few years ago when his Red-Handed book came out.
Yeah.
And he signed it for me.
He was setting fire to people's books?
That's exactly what he did to mine. It was one of those things that there was a particular page where in this narrative, the page gets burnt, and he literally burned a page, and he was like, watch this. I think he just takes a strange glee in making his books into an actual work of art, each individual book. And then also kind of watching, fanboys' faces kind of freak out when I was like, you just set my book on fire. I've talked with him about that. We had him on the show for an interview a couple of years ago, I think. And so that was interesting. Yeah, I've got a copy that has the page burnt as well. And just with mind management, and we can go on to the next title after this. But one of the things that struck me about it is just how much the actual physical object of the book and how it's laid out ties into the narrative. Like that, the first time I read it, it blew my mind. And this is one of those books that I don't think you can read this book once. You have to read this book 2 or 3 times to kind of even get everything, because there's multiple things going on at the same time, and it's really rewarding. So, that's important to point out, because I was on, I can't remember if you were in the audience or not, but did you go to that panel that I was on with Matt Kindt? Yeah, I did. Yeah. And if you remember, this topic came up, and the gist of the panel was digital, print, and discussing the possibilities of what each may offer over the other, or some of the different dynamics of reading. And an example of one of the things that we were discussing was Matt Kindt's mind management. And so he was on the panel to talk about that. And there's so much going on in terms of mind management that I remember in my original reading, and even in rereading all of mind management,
I mean, it's a laborious process because not only do you have to read the narrative proper, but then there is the, if you want to call it the marginalia things, right, that he has going on that becomes a part of the story as well. And even then, though, when you read that, you have to kind of flip your book or flip your tablet or whatever means you're using to read mind management. And so you have to go back and reread, but you're reading different things through each issue, or even if you do this page by page. So, yeah, it's fascinating, and I really do like how Matt Kindt overall draws our attention not just to his story, but the process of both his creation of the narrative and our reading experience. Yeah,
and I don't know, that's to me one of those things that when we talk about comics and now there's multiple formats and web formats and things like that, to me, it's well worthwhile buying a physical copy of his books because there's so much thought into it and it's so bound together. And I love that he's that mindful and creative and just, I don't know, it amazes me just the physical products that he is able to put out with these books. And one of the things I didn't know, but from the solicit, I guess this has been optioned by Ridley Scott. So that's good on Matt. Congratulations.
Yeah. So I think you have one other thing in the Dark Horse section.
I do. I have on page 110, Warbears, which is, I don't know. Did you read, what was it? Catbird Man? What was that book? The other book that, what was her name?
Right, Catbird, and I can't remember the exact title. But yeah, that Margaret Atwood did.
That's right,
her
Margaret
first
Atwood.
Foray into comics. Yeah, I read that first volume, I think, or at least the first few issues, and I liked it well enough. But I haven't read any of the issues of Warbears, and this collection, which is hardbound, is all 3 of the Warbears issues that they've released.
And this is another one of that Catbird series was just, it was nuts. Like it was not, I read it and it was kind of like a public service announcement and a weird superhero story and a weird romance with some sci-fi elements. And it went a lot more into the cat and bird mentalities than I thought it was going to. And this is another one of those books though, that I'm kind of interested in it for the artist because Ken Stacy, who does the art for this, I've not seen anything by him in a long time as well. And, maybe shame on me for not knowing what he's been putting out, but I just have not been aware of a lot of things. I thought he was working in animation or something like that and not so much in comics anymore. So I'm more interested in the artwork and seeing kind of where his style is at this point in time. And it should be weird. So yeah. There's that. It's got that going for it too.
I think it's worth checking out. I looked at that and I didn't list it, but maybe I should have.
Well, who knows?
But you mentioned it, so hey, there you go.
Say that's why we're both here.
Yep. Now I have 3 more things that I wanted to highlight in the Dark Horse section. And the first of those 3 is on page 120. Now, listeners of our monthly previews shows know that every time a new title is solicited with the EC archives, which Dark Horse has been doing for a number of years now, before it had been Gemstone and then I think GC Press.
Right.
But, Dark Horse has had it for, quite a while. But now we have another collection in the EC archives, and this is Piracy. And what's interesting about Piracy is that Piracy was the very last title that was part of EC Comics' New Trend series, right? Because when we think of New Trend, we think of things like The Vault of Horror, The Haunt of Fear, Weird Science, Weird Fantasy, Crime Suspense Stories, Two-Fisted Tales, and things of that sort, right? Even Mad.
Right.
And then its follow-up to Humor Panic, right. But Piracy was originally released toward the end of 1954. Now, this is after the House committee hearings on comics, but it was before they ditched the new trend titles and went to what they called the new direction with, significantly less successful titles like Psychoanalysis and MD and Extra. And now the EC archives now through Dark Horse, they are starting to come out with collections that were a part of the New Direction series. Mm-hmm. But again, I think it's worth noting that Piracy, which is now being solicited, was the last of the new trend titles that they're coming out with.
Yeah, and I'm glad that these things are out there in so many different formats as well, just because, or from public, these are, I mean, they're gorgeous books. And they hold up pretty well, I think. That's one of the things that surprises me about them, because they're ones that I think, was it Gladstone started doing these in the 80s? There's multiple formats for these EC books.
Yeah, well, they've been coming out with these reprints of EC issues in these collections. I mean, a variety of presses for quite a number of years now, even decades.
Right.
But in its current format, it started with Gemstone. In Gemstone,
that's right.
I can't remember. I think it was back in maybe the early 2000s. Maybe I'm wrong there. But Gemstone had come out with the initial EC Archive volumes. And then GC Press briefly, I think for only 2 volumes, picked up where Gemstone left off. Mm-hmm. And then Dark Horse, a number of years back, maybe about 6 or 7 even, started to basically pick up where GC Press left off.
Right.
So, yeah, there are those. And I have to say, even though it does, I guess, border on double dipping, I'm one who really loves this material and will get all of these volumes, as well as Fantagraphics' series that they're doing with the EC stuff. Now, theirs is a different format, right? So those are, Fantagraphics are more creator-based or writer-artist-based. And so it's different from what Dark Horse is doing now, in that they're more chronologically based, and we have the collected issues as they originally appeared.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I love that they're also in, well, I haven't looked at these, but I note that they're in full color, which not all the reprints were in color throughout these runs, at least the ones I recall. I remember big slipcases of hardcovers that were black and white, I think, before people kind of got a concerted effort to treat these as archival material and really do them justice. So I might have to check these out just to see what they look like as physical objects.
Now, my last 2 selections in the Dark Horse section are both manga. And the first one is on page 122, and this is Berserk Deluxe Edition Volume 1. And this is written with art by Kentaro Miura. I'd heard of Berserk in the past. I've never read it, but I received an email from someone who listens to our shows, especially our manga episodes, quite often, and he emails us and gives us a heads up on what we may want to discuss, what we may want to read, what we may want to know in terms of upcoming releases. Jason Ruane. And Jason, if you're listening to this, thank you very much for all your emails. But he sent me one about a week or so ago saying something about Dark Horse coming out with these deluxe editions of Berserk. So this may be an opportunity to jump on the Berserk wagon. And who knows, maybe Shay and I can discuss this on an episode of the Manga Show next year.
It sounds... The cover is very elegant and minimal, but the description sounds interesting. And this is not a title. My manga knowledge is very scant. I will just admit. So this is. I love that they make these giant books, though. I mean, it's like, I don't know. To me, that's one of the things that's amazing. Like the few manga titles I am into, instead of having 22 little books, it's really nice to be able to get 4 or 5 really big, nice, substantial books. And
then the other manga selection, and the last one for the Dark Horse section, is page 124, and this is volume 9 of I Am a Hero by Kingo Hanazawa. And this is a title that I've been keeping up with fairly regularly. I do have to admit that I, not too long ago, got volumes 7 and 8 and haven't yet read them. But I don't know. Have you read any of I Am a Hero?
I hadn't, and I didn't note it in my list going through this, but this is one of those titles that did jump out at me. I mean, I'm always kind of loath to get into a series after it's been out for such a while, just because I kind of feel overwhelmed sometimes starting at the beginning. But this is definitely intriguing. I love this concept, and the cover art is pretty catchy.
Yeah, this is something, at least with the first volume, that Shay and I discussed on a manga episode quite a while back. Mm-hmm. I don't know how long this series is going to go for, but it's one of those that has captured my attention. I'm on board for. I'll read all of these volumes as they come out. Mm-hmm. Or I'll try to the best of my ability.
Right.
And yeah, it's some people have called it a manga Walking Dead. And to some degree, that's the case, I think. I was hoping, especially after the first volume of this Omnibus series, that it would be something other than a manga Walking Dead. But in reading on, volumes 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, yeah, it does seem to be something more akin to a Walking Dead kind of scenario, but which I have no problem with. Mm-hmm. But Hanazawa handles it differently from Kirkman, so I appreciate that. And the art is just phenomenal, not just the covers.
And it says the group of survivors is led by a former manga creator himself. So
right,
how does that figure in?
Yeah, well, you find that especially in the first volume that he's someone who's struggling to become a success. I mean, he's had a little success as a manga creator. Mm-hmm. He has a girlfriend, though, that we see in the first volume, who also is in the manga industry, but we find out in terms of the backstory that there's some problem between the two of them because of another manga creator who is much more popular. And so, he has this weight on his shoulders as well. And when at one point he goes to see his former girlfriend, he discovers that she is acting strange, she looks a little weird, and she is attempting to bite him. And so this is one of the first indications that whatever it is that is causing this zombification of the population in Tokyo has taken hold. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it is interesting, and this is something that I think is arguably a good horror title if people want to look at horror manga, especially for the month of October, as Shay and I plan on doing for the October show. Then, they wouldn't go wrong by checking out, if they haven't already, I Am a Hero.
Well, I might just have to do that.
Okay, so after Dark Horse, there is the DC section, and in the catalog proper, it's truncated, kind of like the Marvel section. Right. But, we do have a separate DC catalog. Was there anything in the DC catalog that really got your attention?
I don't think. I mean, I've cheated and since looked at what you've picked, but. There wasn't anything that jumped out at me as looking at your list, there's a couple things I'd really like to talk about, but I didn't really select anything out of their offerings.
Yeah, there wasn't a lot in the DC catalog this time around that I wanted to mention on the show. I mean, the superhero stuff, some of it seems interesting. But again, because we don't focus on the mainstream superhero, we usually don't bring this stuff up. Right. But there are a couple things. Now, one is, and this is on page 4 of the DC catalog. This is the next in the new series that Vertigo has started to come out with over the past month or two. This is Goddess Mode #1, written by Zoe Quinn with art by Robbie Rodriguez. It says in the solicit, in a near future where humanity's needs are provided for by a godlike AI, it's one woman's horrible job to do tech support on it. But Cassandra Price's life changes forever when she discovers a hidden digital world beneath our own, one where a group of superpowered women are locked in a secret war for the cheat codes to reality. So it seems intriguing, but it also definitely seems like a Vertigo title.
Yeah.
Or a Vertigo premise.
What page is that on?
4.
Page 4?
Yeah.
The proper catalog. I'm looking through.
No. Of the DC catalog.
Oh, the DC catalog. Sorry.
Right. Yeah, because DC has its own catalog right now.
That's my issue. Okay.
For the past few months. So, I like the fact that Vertigo is starting to flex its muscles again. In other words, they have yet another new initiative of getting several titles out there. And I hope that this gains some traction because, as I've said often on the Comics Alternative, I always root for Vertigo. I have a long history with them. And even in those periods where their output seems to ebb, I'm nonetheless right there with them.
Yeah, and they're one of those imprints that I check in with once in a while, and it's like you say, like I want to find something good. Mm-hmm. And I've listened to your review about you guys talked about Bordertown. Didn't you talk about Bordertown?
I talked about it on an On Location show.
That's what you talked about it with. That's what I remember. I remember listening to that.
That was pretty good.
Yeah. And that's the thing. I mean, it seems like they put out a lot of different titles. And for me, like you said, like you highlight one, it's one of those things that I don't know. I think they put out a lot. They don't all appeal to me, but Goddess Mode seems really intriguing. I like the sci-fi. I like the OIT angle. That's kind of weird and interesting.
Mm-hmm. Another Vertigo title in this month's DC catalog is on page 50. And this is something that I'm actually surprised we haven't had yet. And this is Absolute Swamp Thing, Volume 1. And I guess I should have known that there hasn't been an absolute volume of Alan Moore's Swamp Thing yet. It just strikes me that there would have been already. But,
right.
I'm not going to get it because I already have all of Moore's Swamp Thing comics collected in, nice hardbound editions. But, this is an absolute edition, so it's going to be oversized. It's going to have additional material. But, it clocks in at $99.99 retail. I'm sure on DCB service, you can get a good discount for this. But, I don't have many absolute editions.
And that's the thing. I don't either. And they're one of those things that I want to get most of the time. But it's like you say, it's kind of like a finance thing. If it's at a good discount and it's not books that I already have lots of versions of, because I think I have original issues of these. And I have a couple of the trade. And the trades I know don't come out very frequently because when I see them, they're kind of rare and they're usually marked up in a way that trade paperbacks aren't. So I don't think DC has done a concerted job of keeping these in print. And it's one of those things that a few years ago, I think for their 75th anniversary, Paul Levitz wrote a book about DC Comics history. It was a huge oversized book. I think Chronicle Books put it out, and it came in a large cardboard suitcase. And I bought the book, and it was a pricey book, but on the side they had 5 bubbles, kind of like their major characters, and it was Superman and Batman and Wonder Woman, and then Swamp Thing and Sandman, and I was like, these are the big characters, I guess, that people, public. It kind of struck me as weird that Sandman and Swamp Thing were there, but then it kind of drew me kind of to reality. I guess. I mean, Swamp Thing has had movies or a television show or something since the 80s. And Sandman is one of those. I mean, that's what basically between Swamp Thing and Sandman kind of kickstarted Vertigo into being what it is or what it was. And so I don't know. I'm very intrigued by this too, because I mean, there's some, this is this the American Scream stories? Or no, not the American Scream, the American Gothic where it kind of goes on tour. Like this would be another good kind of Halloween book, because it's like every issue or every couple issues were like these very specific horror scenes across America. I love these stories, and the artwork in them is gorgeous.
Yeah, I mean, you really can't go wrong with Alan Moore's Swamp Thing.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to get the Omnibus just because of pricing. It's an extravagance.
It's tempting.
Yeah, it's tempting. But something for me that's even more tempting, much more tempting, is my final selection in the DC catalog, and this is on page 56. This is something that I would like to discuss on a future episode of the podcast. Detective Comics Before Batman. And this is a 2-volume hardcover slipcase edition from the looks of it. and it collects Detective Comics 1 through 26 because, if you recall, we're introduced to Batman in 27. So the first volume collects issues 1 through 13, and the second issues 14 through 26. So we get crime fighters, for instance, as they say in the solicit, Slam Bradley, Bart Regan, Speed Saunders, and more. Plus, we also have Crimson Avenger, Fu Manchu, and others that are included, their stories in Detective Comics. And so it'd be interesting to look at and even discuss on a future episode what Detective Comics looked like before the introduction of Batman.
Yeah, I'd be on board with that. That's, I mean, from a historical standpoint, it's intriguing. And just to kind of look at what other characters are out there. I mean, Golden Age comics were, when they were kind of, making the airplane as they were flying it. Like there's a lot of weird, interesting concepts in there. Some that get developed and some that don't. And it's kind of interesting to me too, because the creators, that a lot of them, as they go on to work on characters that you do know,
right.
And you got a lot of weird, obscure things prior. So, and I don't know, it's one of those. I don't know if you were like me when I was a kid, I would get that Overstreet price guide and I'd look at it, and seemed like, like it would talk about introducing characters or like certain storylines, and there was something almost like there was some kind of like arcane books of comics lore that I always wanted to see these things. Just like it just seemed like there was just something intriguing and mysterious and kind of magical that I'd never really put my hands on. And those first issues of Detective Comics they kind of fall into that category for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we can mention that in a future episode, I think later this month, you and I are going to be discussing a somewhat similar text, and that is DC Comics Before Superman. That it's something that Hermes Press just recently released, and we do have plans to discuss that on a show sometime in October. So look forward to that, listeners.
That's right. See, plug. And I will add this because I've been searching through, and there is one DC book I would like to highlight, and that's one of the Young Animal titles, Shade the Changing Woman.
Oh, the second trade.
That's right. And I will admit this, I have every one of these issues. I think there's 6 of them, and I have not read them. I have them in a box, and they're ready to read. But I really enjoyed Shade the Changing Girl, the series that really preceded this. And I think it was, out of those Young Animal titles, my favorite series. The overall, I just really enjoyed it, and so I'm hoping that this is also as consistently awesome.
Yeah, actually, I think the second trade. No, that was mistaken, because we do have 2 collections of Shade the Changing Girl, but this is the one trade of Shade the Changing Woman, because unfortunately, the Young Animal titles were discontinued, I think, after, with all the series, the new incarnations, the 6th issue. So
right, I think the Doom Patrol is going to be ongoing, but it seems to be kind of coming out sporadically. Well,
no, I think it was my understanding that Doom Patrol will end just like the other Young Animal titles, but it was normally coming out late anyhow, even before they announced that they're going to get rid of Young Animal.
Well, news to me.
So after DC, there is IDW, and I think you and I start at the same place in IDW on page 145, correct?
That's right, with Rocketeer Reborn, #1.
Yeah, and this is written by Elsa Charité and Pierrick Collinet, with art by Javier Pulido. This is interesting. Now, it's not unusual for us every now and again to get from IDW some kind of Rocketeer story, right? But every instance that at least I can recall, it's Rocketeer that was embedded in the original world that Dave Stevens created.
Right.
This is different in that, as they're saying in the solicit, a Rocketeer for a new century. It's been 80 years since Cliff Secord first found an experimental jetpack and soared through the skies as the Rocketeer, becoming a hero along the way. Now, decades later, the Rocketeer is all but forgotten, a legend of a bygone era, until Cliff's jetpack is found, but in a most unexpected way, one that causes conflict for several people, each of whom are drawn to the jetpack, some for good and some for evil.
Yeah, and this is, I mean, I've read a lot of those old Dave Stevens Rocketeer books, and that was another one of those series that kind of, it was in a backup here and an issue here and a thing, like as a kid over multiple publishers. And I know that, you know, it's been a movie that Disney put out, and it's been collected various different ways. And, you know, every once in a while you get a story set in that time. But I'm in the can for this kind of tale. And it's you know, I like the cover. It's intriguing because it looks like it's set at like or at least the image is it looks like it's in a 50s style diner, which kind of gives it that historical flavor that the classic Rocketeer stories have. But then if you look towards the bottom, there's somebody with like a phone taking a picture of the helmet. Mm-hmm. And that's, you know, putting it in kind of in a subtle way in contemporary times. And Javier Pulido is one of those artists that I've really enjoyed his work. I know he's done a bunch of different Marvel titles. I think he did the art for She-Hulk, like one of those She-Hulk series when she was more like a lawyer than she was a superhero. And he also did, I think, some Black Cat comics that I recall. So I really like his style, and it looks appropriately, you know, cast in that kind of. It doesn't look like Dave Stevens. It looks more cartoony, right, but it still looks. I don't know, historical in not in a dated way. It just looks like it's of a different time period. I love the way he draws those little old timey cars at the top of the title. And,
well, I tell you, Pulido's art reminds me to some degree, at least on the cover, of Jaime Hernandez. Yeah,
I would say that it's that realistic cartoony art, like a contemporary Archie, maybe.
Yeah, I'm wondering who is going to be the Betty figure in this new Rocketeer modern day story.
Mm-hmm. I also wonder about, when I see a book like this, who the audience is, because I get that they're trying to reinvent it for a pretty, you know, a contemporary audience, but I also wonder if it's more people that remember the original Rocketeer. I mean, that movie was, I think, 1990. And I mean, that property and those comics are, you know, at least the substantial ones are all published in the 80s. So it's like, it seems to me like a modern audience. I hope it catches on with a younger crowd. Yeah, I do too. Well, where do you go next in IDW? I went to the very next page on 146. This is the number 2 issue, but
speaking of intended audiences.
That's right. But it's GoBots number 2, right? Tom Scioli is doing GoBots, which never had a comic book. I think that's something that I follow him on Twitter too, and I really like watching, because he's got I don't think he's doing it right now, but he was doing a Jack Kirby biography comic on Twitter, and it was very interesting to kind of look at, you know, in terms of the history of comics. But this is more like an intriguing title for me, because I have a lot of friends that like those G.I. Joe Transformer comics. And like you say, you know, this is definitely geared towards, you know, a certain sort of nostalgia. And I've not read those Transformer G.I. Joe comics, but from what I hear from people, they love them. And I had GoBot toys when I was a kid. GoBots were kind of like off-brand Transformers. Mm-hmm. So I'm just kind of intrigued, just because I don't think that anything's ever had they've never had a narrative treatment that wasn't a children's cartoon. So I think this is potentially intriguing just in terms of that, to see a contemporary creator kind of be given these characters and free reign to do kind of what he wants to. And I like his style. I mean, his art style is always gorgeous to me. It's like, it harkens back to Kirby. There's definitely, the cover, the face on the cover looks like it could be, you know, some kind of Kirby knockoff from maybe 2001, that comic or something like that. But I don't know. I'm just intrigued. It's something I'd flip through and check out. And then after that, where do you go? After that, I go to Dick Tracy, Dead or Alive, number 4. Issue number 4, yeah. That's right. Yeah, and we should mention, we're going to discuss in an upcoming episode, I think maybe next week, issue number 1 of Dick Tracy, Dead or Alive. So that'll give us ample opportunity to discuss what the All Reds
and Tommaso are doing.
Yeah, and I don't want to, tip too much about what that is, but I'm a big fan of all those creators, and I'm not the biggest Dick Tracy fan all the time, but I definitely love the visual style, and it's a classic. It's a classic character and a classic kind of narrative, and I think the updated version just was worth checking out, and that's all I'm going to say.
Yeah. Now, the only other things that I have in the IDW section are both on the top shelf imprint page, and this is on 161. And this is Belzebubs by J.P. Ahonen and Ye, and that's Y-E, by Guilherme Petrica.
Well said.
Yeah, I'm trying to pronounce this way. And I think Petrica is Brazilian, and I don't know where Ahonen is from. If he's not from the U.S., I don't know. These look really interesting. With Belzebubs, they call this a, quote, true cult mockumentary, unquote, focusing on the everyday challenges of family life, raising kids, running a small business, and making time for worship. Except the kids are named Lilith and Leviathan, the business is a black metal band, and the worship isn't exactly aimed upstairs. So this looks fun. I don't know if I would have pointed this out if it weren't a top shelf title.
Right.
I mean, Top Shelf is one of those publishers, or now I guess an imprint of IDW, that they can't go wrong. Everything they do, I think, is really worth checking out. So that was one of the reasons why I pointed this out. It does look intriguing, both the art as well as the premise. But also, Ye, and I guess that's how you pronounce it, Y-E again, by Petrica. Ye is a curious young man named after the only sound he knows how to make. His voice must have been stolen by the colorless king, the source of all the world's sorrows, terrifying, unrelenting, all-taking, and never giving. Now, Ye has no choice but to embark on a long voyage over land and sea, past grizzled pirates, a drunken clown, and more to find the famous witch who can help him defeat the colorless king. What he discovers may be a lesson for us all. Yeah, now, outside of the fact that a drunken clown is a quite frightening image, or any kind of clown can be a frightening image.
Oh, yeah.
This looks to me as something that, I don't know, I would definitely be up for discussing this on a future weekly review show, or, given the premise that I just read, it's something that maybe could be also appropriate for our Young Reader series.
Yeah, it is an intriguing title, and if we do talk about it on the weekly podcast, the weekly review show, I'm going to insist that you watch Shakes the Clown before we watch this.
I was thinking of Shakes the Clown in terms of the drunken clown. Well, because this is a translation, it's something that Pascal and I can also discuss on the Eurocomic show.
That's true.
But, they describe this toward the bottom of that page. It says, in the tradition of The Little Prince, The Never-Ending Story, and A Wrinkle in Time. So that being the case, this may be something that is specifically written for younger readers.
Yeah, and that's and kind of to contrast, to go back to that Belzebubs book, it looks like it's for young readers, but it's really not.
Yeah.
I went and I did a little looking last night about this online because it is a webcomic. The creator, he's Finnish. He's from Finland, Ahonen.
Okay, so this may be a translation as well.
Yes, and I think it's one of those things that, I've not been extensively traveled in Europe, but I've actually been to Finland. And one of the things that struck me about it was I literally got out of a train station and into smack dab a giant goth festival that was going on in the town where there was this academic conference. And the people in this comic, it was like that train station was just full of them. So my impression of Finland is that this kind of goth thing is way more prevalent there and way more of a popular form. So I don't know. I'm intrigued. The comics I saw online were actually really funny, but also had a strange kind of dark. Well, there's a lot of Satanism and things like that in it. So I don't know. It's intriguing to me. I definitely would check this out.
Yeah. Now, do you have anything else in IDW before we move on to the other publishers?
I mean, I just mentioned that on the next page on 162, there's the latest issue in the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, the current volume 4. That I always check out books like that.
Tempest.
Tempest. The Tempest.
Yeah, the Tempest. Yeah.
And supposedly this is the final. Never going to be another League of Extraordinary Gentlemen story, which we'll see. But it's Alan Moore, it's Kevin O'Neill, and I definitely always check those out, and I try to get them in the individuals, even though I know that they're going to reprint it in a nice hard copy.
Yeah, I had thought about at one point discussing the first issue of League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, The Tempest, on a previous review show. We didn't get around to it, but I would definitely be up for discussing this once all the issues have been collected.
Oh yeah, I've kept up with it, and it's been rewarding. I mean, we're kind of literature people too, so I mean, if you're a literature fan and a comics fan, I think Moore is very rewarding. He gives you tidbits everywhere.
So after IDW, there is Dynamite Entertainment, and this time around, this month, I have nothing in Dynamite.
I have one. It's on page 186, and it's actually the third issue of a Mars Attack series. And really, I love the old classic bubblegum cards and those, that kind of lurid art and the kind of horrific things. But really, what recommends this series to me, it's written by Kyle Starks, who I love Kyle Starks, and I know he's been on the show. He's hilarious. And it's art by Chris Schweitzer, and I love Chris Schweitzer. And this is just one of those books that, that writer-artist combination, I will buy pretty much anything that they do and they collaborate on. So I will check that out.
And then after Dynamite, there is Boom Studios, and I think both of us have 2 or 3 things there. Now, my first title that I wanted to mention, and also, well, it begins on page 202, but if you look on the next page, there are other titles that are linked to this.
Right.
I don't know if you were a fan of Grant Morrison and Dan Mora's Klaus, but I read the first, or at least most of the first volume of Klaus when it first came out a few years ago. Now we have a new storyline, Klaus and the Crying Snowman, #1. And, I absolutely love what Morrison is doing in reconceiving of the character of Santa Claus, right? But it's Dan Mora's art, I think, that really is winning, along with Morrison's writing. So anyway, that's on page 202. And if you go to 203, then we can see, I guess solicited again, is 2 hardcover editions, Klaus, How Santa Claus Began, and then Klaus, The New Adventures of Santa Claus. So just in time for Christmas, I guess, you can get these, and you can get in the holiday spirit.
Yeah, and these did jump out at me. I didn't pick them. I don't know why. I think it's because Morrison is one of those creators that of late I either like in love with, or maybe I just have Morrison burnout, where I'm just kind of tired of his voice and his the way he does things, and I'm not sure. I liked it. It's. I didn't read the original series, and I was intrigued by the collections. It's something I would look at. To me, I didn't know if it was too gimmicky. I don't know. It struck me as I don't know. There's something about it that just didn't sit right with me. But that's my own kind of thought about this. I mean, I don't know if I need a grim and gritty Santa Claus, but I don't know if it is that. It just looks like that from the cover. He's ripped. He's got a giant sword. But maybe I'm not the audience, or maybe I'm putting out my own thoughts on it without preconceived notions, without actually having read the series. It's something I'd be intrigued by. I'd check out, but I wouldn't buy it for $35 for 208 pages. I looked at that pricey price.
Yeah.
And maybe it's a beautiful object, but that was the thing that occurred to me about it.
Now on that next page, 204, is something else that seems intriguing. And I'm bringing this up because it strikes me that this may be a title that Gwen and her new co-host for the Monthly Young Reader series, Crystal, may want to check out. This is coming out in February, and it is The Great Wiz and the Ruckus. This is written and illustrated by Joey McCormick, who has done work on Adventure Time in the past. And it just seems fun, something for younger readers especially. And so, Gwen, if you're listening to this, Crystal, then, hey, check it out. I know that they've discussed Boom titles on the Young Reader series in the past, but this may be another one that they want to confront.
Yeah, it looks like a cool bunch of adventurers. The character design is very intriguing.
Mm-hmm. But I think both you and I are interested in what's on the next page on 205, Waves.
That's right. It's by, is it Archaea, the imprint?
Yeah, Boom's imprint.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is written by Ingrid Chabert with art by Carol Morel. And if the name Carol Morel sounds familiar, that's because a couple of months ago, Pascal and I discussed Morel's Louisa Now and Then, which was an intriguing book. I really enjoyed that. But now we get Morel doing the art, but not the story.
Yeah, did Ad House put out that book? Who put out that book?
That was, Louisa Now and Then was a Humanoids. It was part of their Life-Drawn imprint.
Okay.
Their initiative from earlier this year.
Okay. I saw that. It was beautiful looking. Mm-hmm. So that's part of what jumped in.
Yeah, and great story too.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, this is interesting. The solicit reads, after years of difficulty trying to have children, a young couple finally announces their pregnancy only to have the most joyous day of their lives replaced with one of unexpected heartbreak. Their relationship is put to the test as they forge ahead, working together to rebuild themselves amidst the churning tumult of devastating loss and ultimately facing the soul-crushing reality that they may never conceive a child of their own. And apparently this is based on things that have actually happened to Chabert. Mm-hmm. Based on her experiences. So it does look really good, and I do enjoy very much Morel's art.
Yeah, and I think this is an example of one of the powers of comics in general is this ability with the combination of words and pictures to kind of tell kinds of stories like this that are very difficult stories. I know that there's a big or a growing body of research in or works looking at kind of medical conditions and comics.
Mm-hmm. Graphic medicine? Yes,
in graphic medicine. And I know that there's been some narratives that I've seen about, dealing with the loss of unborn, they're not children, but, having pregnancies not happen and how people respond to them. And, it's hard to put all that stuff into words. And sometimes the pictures make it more relatable. And to me, this is not something I'm looking forward to in this is going to be like a fun book, but this is going to be a heavy book, and it's going to make me, I think, feel some things maybe I don't want to feel. But I think that it's an important kind of book to look at. I mean, I know that personally, I'm not able to be pregnant. So, but we've been in, my wife and I have lost things, and we've had things happen. So I know, and I know lots of people that these are very common experiences, but they're not ones that people generally talk about. So they're kind of taboo, or they're seen as, socially difficult. So I'm glad that there's a book like this that we can, kind of start conversations that I think are worth having.
Yeah. And in fact, Mandy, my wife, and I have had, I guess, similar experiences. Mm-hmm. And this does seem like something that would fit within, or I guess under, the graphic medicine umbrella. Now, it comes out in late February. And one of the things that has come up 2 or 3 times over the past year is the possibility of us doing a special episode of the Comics Alternative devoted to graphic medicine texts. Mm-hmm. Now, that is a line, I guess, an imprint that the Penn State University Press has, graphic medicine. And we've discussed 2 or 3 of their texts in the past. Mm-hmm. But there are other publishers who have done books that deal with health, medicine, what have you, in one form or another, that are very similar, right? So it could be described not with maybe a capital G graphic, capital M medicine, but as a kind of illustrated narrative that deals with health issues in one form or another, graphic medicine broadly defined. And so maybe we can do early next year that special episode on graphic medicine and include Waves.
Hey, that sounds intriguing to me.
On the next page, I have the last thing I wanted to mention in the Boom Studios section of the catalog, and that is on 206, mm-hmm. Wizard Beach, #1 a 5-issue miniseries, and this is written by Sean Simon with art by Connor Nolan. And I mention this for, I guess, in similar ways that I wanted to bring up the Great Wiz and the Ruckus, is this just strikes me as something that would be perfect for a young reader's show. When Hexley Daggart Ragbottom sets off to find his Uncle Cesar, he expects to find the most powerful wizard of the modern age. Instead, he finds Uncle Sally only wants to kick back, relax, and stay clear of any kind of wizard politics. So how is Hex supposed to become a great wizard if all the adults are too lazy to teach him? And the image here, which I guess will be the cover of issue number 1,
right,
is of this wizard who is lying on the beach reading what looks to be a book of hexes and spells, because there's some kind of skull emanating from the pages. But, he's kicked back. He has a drink that may or may not be a beer that is spilling. He has a glass also with some ice in it and a little umbrella in it. So it looks really fun.
Yeah, and this looks like, I love that art style. It looks like that kind of classic Mad magazine. Like there's like a Tutankhamun looking death mask hanging out of the sand. I mean, there's little details here and there that I love comics like that they kind of reward you with the backgrounds or the foregrounds in this matter. So
what do you have, if anything, in Boom?
I have one more title that's towards the end of the section. It's on page 226. And it is called Feathers, and it's another title I think that's aimed at younger readers.
217, I think.
217. I'm sorry, 217. See, I'm looking at the PDF numbers and not the not the actual page numbers. And to me, it's a soft cover. It's by a creator named Jorge Corona, who won the 2015 Russ Manning Promising Newcomer Award, and it's a story about I'll read you this list. It's born covered in black feathers, abandoned as a baby in the slums of the maze. Poe has lived his entire 11-year-old life hidden away until he meets Bianca, an overprotected girl from the wealthy city beyond the wall. As danger looms on all sides, a friendship grows between the city girl and the boy covered in feathers, a friendship that may just be enough to bring Bianca home and lead Poe to his destiny. It's kind of like a Billy Joel song, but it's kind of like a YA story. So I don't know. There's something about that kind of narrative framework. I like a story like this. And I'm always looking, part of my job is to teach people to teach middle school as well as high school. So I'm always on the lookout for books that, can appeal to different audiences. So, I read things for adults. I read things for younger readers. And this is one of those titles that just seems, if done right, it'll be a really fun book that might be full of good characters. And, that remains to be seen, but I'd be willing to give it a shot. It seems like a promising title.
Okay. Now it says that this soft cover, Feathers, will go on sale February 20th.
Right.
I had assumed, and correct me if I'm wrong, that there was already a trade collection of Feathers that came out previously. Maybe this is a new edition. Maybe the first one was hardback. I don't know. But I do know that we have double dipped in Corona's Feathers on the podcast a few years ago, and I can't remember who discussed this with me, but we looked at issue number 1 of Feathers, and then about a year later when everything was finished and I assume collected, I know that Gwen and I guess it may have been Paul discussed Feathers on one of their young reader shows.
Well, shame on me for not remembering that.
Yeah, but I mean, it is a good story, and I would recommend this. So if you didn't jump on board Corona's Feathers before, now's the time.
Yep, I think that's going to be me. I'm jumping in.
Okay, so after the Boom Studios section, with the way that the catalog has changed over the past few months, then we get to what many people call the back half, or the green section. In other words, the smaller presses, some even self-published, for instance, in the case of Abstract Studio with Terry Moore.
Right.
But yeah, these are not the premier publishers. And I believe you have something before my first recommendation in the green section.
I do. I have a title from, is it Albatross Funnybooks, which is that's an interesting name for a publisher, and I like it. But there's a series coming out. There's a number one called Mega Ghost is the series, written by Gabe Soria with art by Gideon Kendall.
And that's on page 250, right?
It is on page 250, and it's there's two covers. One is by Kendall, and one is by Eric Powell, who does the Goon, among other things. But this is a story about, it seems like it's a young occultist, and he's got the power, he's got a ring to summon Mega Ghost, who is a giant supernatural robot sworn to defend the world against creepy things that go smash in the night. And this seems like it might be aimed towards younger readers as well, but I'm kind of intrigued by, I like monster stories, and I like stories where kids can make giant robots show up and beat up things, and the cover's got a giant robot with like a skull face, and there's a ghost flying around, and I'm just kind of intrigued by those kinds of concepts in general. So I definitely would check this out just to kind of give it a flyer and see what it's about.
Yeah, and the thing about Albatross Funnybooks is, this is Powell's baby, right? Mm-hmm. And in addition to his own stuff that he puts out through this press, he's been doing more with other creators over the past year and a half, and so I guess this is another instance of this. So yeah, I do hope that Albatross Funnybooks continues to grow as a publishing option, and that it doesn't begin to do what we see, let's say, a lot of other newer or new-ish presses do. And I'm thinking here of something like an Aftershock, right? Or even imprints like Black Crown at IDW, and to maybe even lesser degree Burger Books. A lot of them seem to be doing the same kind of things. And they could be great stories, great art, great concepts, but it's similar to the point that you wonder how much of this can the market sustain. And we've discussed this before, I think, on a previous episode of a preview show. Paul and I did. But the thing about Albatross Funnybooks, the stories, the premises are uniquely different from about anything else you're seeing from other publishers, large or small. So I hope they continue doing what they're doing.
Yeah, and I'm learning things. I didn't even know Eric Powell was that was his imprint. So.
Oh yeah, and in fact, I think years and years ago when he was self-publishing The Goon, that it was an early incarnation of Albatross Funnybooks, and then it went to Dark Horse, and then over the past couple of years, he's really been bringing back Albatross Funnybooks.
Well, good on him.
Yeah. Now, I don't have anything in the green section until page 282. Do you have anything else before that?
I don't.
Okay. And this is something, actually, it's a little unusual for me because I don't usually highlight Black Mask Studios titles on preview shows. Not because I don't necessarily like Black Mask titles. I do every now and again when I pick them up, but I just historically, I haven't gone out of my way to check out new Black Mask titles. This one, though, seems interesting, and this is on, again, page 282. It's Emmie-X, All Systems Go, #1. This is going to be a 4-issue miniseries. And it was the solicit that caught my attention. Teenage skater rat Emmy runs a punk record shop in an abandoned strip mall during the Cal Exit military occupation. When Homeland Security turns the strip mall into a detention center, Emmy realizes she must fight the power. So apparently this Emmie-X concept was published in a one-shot at Comic-Con in order to raise money for immigrant families separated at the border by our current quote-unquote president and the various machinations of the people around him. Okay, that's my politics for this episode. But I like that. I like the fact that it does focus on a quite contemporary issue. And, I said earlier that there would be one or two additional mentionings of immigration issues in current politics on this episode. This is one of them. And so I would be willing to check out Emmie-X, All Systems Go #1 for that reason alone.
Yeah, I definitely think I'm intrigued by it by the same things. I have to admit it didn't jump out at me on at first glance, but I've read a couple Black Mask books, and I like what they do. And this definitely seems topical, and it's very interesting to me that they got a blurb from Entertainment Weekly and Rolling Stone, so they're definitely networking with some big platforms to kind of get their work out there too. Mm-hmm. I think that's impressive.
Yeah. Now, I don't have anything until page 292, but you have, I think, things before that.
I have one thing on page 285. I think it was 285. It was
Die Kitty Die, Heaven
Die
and
Kitty
Hell.
Die, which I don't. It's in the middle. It's number 3, and I don't know if that's a title that y'all have talked about before.
No, we haven't.
A million years ago, there was a Kickstarter for this, and it's Dan Parent, who used to work for Archie. This is kind of his. It's like Archie done in a horror way. Kitty's kind of this Sabrina type, who's kind of also an actress, and she's got a comic book about her, and her publisher is, in order to make money, is decreed that she has to die. That way that they will be able to publish the Death of Kitty issues and then kind of, make money on that. But except for that, the publisher really wants to kill her. That's the kind of the premise of the book. And I just think it's fun. It's not the most complicated story, but I really like the art, and I like the kind of meta story about the comics industry and, kind of how it operates. And I don't know, to me, it's a fun book. So I thought I'd bring it up.
Okay. Yeah, I haven't checked that out, although I have noticed Parent's art in earlier solicits.
I like it. It's like Archie, but different.
Mm-hmm. Now, I had mentioned that I have something on 292, and this is actually another thing that's a little unusual. It's not often that I'll mention anything on a preview show from Devil's Due or First Comics, but this is a title that got my attention just because of the noir look of it. This is Lovetown #1. This is written and drawn by Matt Yuan and Josh Yuan. And so the solicit reads, when famed artist Fillmore Hauser is killed at one of his infamous soirees, Detective Saxon must find the murderer. Despite the house being full of guests, nobody saw a thing. Is this Lovetown's code of silence at play, or is there a more sinister explanation? So this seems to be a mix between horror and noir, which I'm intrigued by, and I'd be willing to check this out. Now, I have no idea how long this series will go for. They don't say that, if it is a miniseries, how many issues we can expect. But, I'd like to check out Lovetown #1.
Yeah, it does. I like a good noir book too. So that I did not look at this one, but it does look like an interesting title. I'd check it out. I like a lot of crime books, and we'll talk about. I think there's one or two coming down the pike. So maybe we can make a crime show.
Yeah, well, we've done that in the past.
That's what.
Let's do it again.
That's. I'm definitely thinking that.
You have me. Now, if we turn the page, we find the beginning of the Drawn in Quarterly section, and this goes Drawn in Quarterly 293 and then 294. I know that you have something in Drawn in Quarterly on 294, but on 293, it's something that, and I'm not familiar with this creator, Julie Deporte.
Yeah.
This woman's work, and it is an autobiographical project, and it says it asks vital questions about femininity and the assumptions we make about gender. Deporte examines the cultural artifacts and sometimes traumatic memories through the lens of a woman she is today, a feminist who understands the reality of women around her, how experiencing rape culture and sexual abuse is almost synonymous with being a woman, and the struggle of reconciling one's feminist beliefs with the desire to be loved. Also rather timely in light of the Kavanaugh hearings. But I guess another political mention on this episode. Hey. But yeah, I would be willing to check this out. Does the name Julie Delporte ring a bell with you? Have you seen anything else she's done?
It doesn't, and I'm intrigued by the description and the title, the cover. I mean, she's like wrestling a bear, which is pretty amazing. I would definitely check this out. It sounds like you said, like it's raising a lot of issues that are right now in the air that need to be addressed, that need to be, talked about. And so I would definitely look at this book.
Mm-hmm. But the thing that you wanted to list or mention in the Drunning Quarterly section is on that next page.
Yeah, and it looks like it's more of like an adventure book. It's called Cave In. It's by a creator named Brian Ralph. Mm-hmm. And it looks like it's about, it says a rat darts across the opening pages into a hole and down a long tunnel, stopping under a hammock. A mole man stretches and wakes up, leading the rat and the reader deeper into the tunnel. What follows is a series of dreamlike sequences, each stranger than the last. And to me, it strikes me as kind of a book. I don't think it has words. It says it's a wordless classic, and it's supposed to be an all ages kind of adventure story, jam-packed with monsters, bats, and all manner of unimaginable underground mystery. And to me, it just sounds like I said before, I kind of like monster stories, and I would check this out just on the strength of the cover image and the fact that I would like to see a story with a guy running through a tunnel with rats and monsters and unimaginable mystery. Yeah.
Now, underneath that is another Brian Ralph book that is being reissued, and that is Daybreak.
Yeah.
And now Cave In, I've read that. I've also read Daybreak. The thing about Cave In actually was published in 1999 by Highwater Books, and Highwater Books is no longer a publisher in existence. Mm-hmm. But that's where I first got a copy, and my assumption is that this is going to be a larger format edition. It's 4.75 by 6. And it is a wordless story, and it is in many ways kind of a typical Brian Ralph narrative. Many of his stories are wordless or almost entirely wordless. You can say the same thing about Daybreak. And Daybreak originally appeared through Bodega in 3 issues, and then Drawn Quarterly came out with the collection, I think in 2011 is when it was. So these are resolicits.
Okay.
But again, it's worth checking out Brian Ralph's work because we don't see much from him, but I think he's someone that especially we on the Comics Alternative should know.
Sure. I didn't even know that there were initial printing. So, I mean, it's all new to me.
Yeah. Well, I think someone else that is also of interest to those who listen to this show is Mark Bell. And we have a resolicit in the Drawn Quarterly section of his book that came out, 2, maybe even 3 years ago, 2.5 years ago, Stropy. And so there's that. But we also get, and I don't know if this is, I guess it's being distributed by Drawn Quarterly, but it's under the No Worlds Books listing, but still, I think, within Drawn Quarterly, I'm not sure. And this is Bell's Worn Tough Elbow number 2.
Right.
Now, I'm not aware of Worn Tough Elbow number 1, but I like Mark Bell's work. I want to get number 2, and I want to seek out Worn Tough Elbow number 1.
I do like the note to consumers, though, that one does not need to know exactly what happened in Worn Tough Elbow 1.
Yeah, but still, the completist in me.
Sure. Oh, sure.
And it may have been a long time since Worn Tough Elbow number 1 came out, but I'm glad that you pointed that out.
Hey, maybe it's one of those, like, Whiz Comics number 1. Like, it doesn't exist. It just starts with number 2.
Let me see. After that, I think both of us go to Fantagraphics.
Yes, we do.
Yeah, and, Drawn Quarterly and Fantagraphics go really well together. It's like chocolate and peanut butter. It's like the American and Canadian Reese's.
Yes.
If we want to look at it that way.
It's like Niagara Falls.
Yeah. There you go.
How's that?
But yeah, so and there's always several things in the Fantagraphics section that is exciting. What in particular stands out for you?
For me, the one thing that jumped out, or one of the first ones, was it's on page 300, which is a nice round page. It's called Ink and Agony, and it's a Jay Lynch anthology. And Jay Lynch is one of those, he started back in the underground comics, and every time, his work shows up in an anthology or showed up in an original comic book here and there, I loved his style. I liked his voice and the weird characters that he has. And so to me, an anthology of his work is really attractive, and it seems like it's a nice size. It's like almost 300 pages. It's going to have commentary by Ed Piskor in it. Mm-hmm. And so, and it's going to have some kind of references to his work with Garbage Pail Kids and Topps Chewing Gum stuff.
Wacky packages.
Yeah, wacky packages. So those are all, throwbacks to my childhood, things that he's definitely been involved with. And it's interesting because a lot of those, the wacky packages and the Garbage Pail Kids, like it did not register with me until later that he was involved, because when I was a kid, I didn't care who was involved. I just kind of liked the objects or the little comics and things in there, the packaging. But now this just seems like, it's like a one-stop shopping. It's going to be a nice book full of work I know I like, and I can survey lots of different things in it. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to get this one because I like Lynch's work. Both the comics and, as you mentioned, the stickers or cards that he worked with the Topps Chewing Gum Company. Also on that page is something else that I'm really interested in, and this is Memorabilia by Sergio Pancione. Mm-hmm. And Pancione also did – there was a series a number of years ago of comics in larger European album size, but softcover, that Fantagraphics came out with. And one of these titles was Grotesque. And I've read Grotesque by Pancione, but it's been quite a while ago. And so they're even offering those 4 issues of Grotesque you can get this month as well. But his new book, Memorabilia, it says it weaves together history, fiction, and fantasy to create 5 stories that illustrate the art and lives of 5 of the greatest comic book artists of all time: Steve Ditko, Jack Kirby, Wally Wood, Will Eisner, and Richard Corbin. So he says Pancione blends biographies of the artist with the characters and worlds of each to create a love letter to the remarkable imagination of these 5 master comics makers. I definitely want to discuss this on the show in some way. That is intriguing. The fact that Pancione is dealing with these historical figures, but it's not just a series of biographies, but there's also some fiction thrown into this, and so it's that curious mix that I want to check out.
Yeah, and that preview image right next to it with it looks like it's a Kirby world. I mean, that looks phenomenal. And this is not one that I highlighted on first blush, but now that I've really delved into what's in it, I'm in the can for this one too. And I like that they helpfully solicit all the grotesques too. So there's 4 issues of that you can get. Yeah.
Now on the next page, still in the Fantagraphics section, are several other titles that I think are really exciting. Both of us are noting issue number 5 of Now, the anthology. And we do plan on discussing Now number 4 in an episode later this month. So keep your ears open for that. Tune in. But now we have issue number 5 is being solicited. Can't wait for this because it is a great anthology. And we have kind of an unofficial plan to discuss every issue of the Now anthology as it comes out on the Comics Alternative.
And I'm glad we're talking about it just because I love a good comics anthology, number 1. And I love that this one is very affordable and just the range of things that are in it. And I have to admit that I'm glad that we talked about reviewing it in the future episode just because it kind of lit a fire under me because I had read the first 2 issues, but I hadn't read the third one. It had been sitting on my shelf for a while, so I'm catching up.
Good. Yeah, Eric Reynolds does a really good job in bringing together everything for Now. But a couple of other things on this page are also really interesting. And at the top, we see a solicit for a book called The Sea. This is by Rikke, Rikke, I guess, Villadsen. I'm not sure how you pronounce that last name, but this is his English language debut, and it's described as the story of a fisherman pulling up his net only to find a newborn baby and a talking fish. Thus begins a story full of symbolism and madness that drenches the sailor and the reader like a tidal wave. So this seems interesting, and I'm wondering if this is his first English language book. So I'm assuming it's not a translation.
Right.
Then where is Villadsen, if that's how you pronounce his last name, from?
I'm going to guess I'm gonna guess he's Finnish too. That strikes me. I watch a lot of hockey, and that strikes me as a Finnish name.
Okay. Underneath that is another book that's coming out from Fantagraphics that I'm really looking forward to, and this is Roman Muradov's Vanishing Act, written and drawn in 13 styles, which grabs my attention. It says Vanishing Act is a web of interconnected stories set in one evening. It's structured so that each act occurs over the course of 20 minutes, while each new act starts the middle of the previous one, each overlapping until the end, when the book loops back to the beginning, a stylistic and formalistic tour de force. As I said with Memorabilia, I definitely want to discuss this one on the show because from the description, it sounds something like, if not outright, what I call a graphic cycle, right? So it's the comics equivalent of what's often called a short story cycle in prose fiction. And so I really enjoy those kind of texts. Another thing this reminds me of, at least with a variation, is that Jarmusch film, A Night on Earth. Remember that?
Yeah.
Where you have, 4 or 5 different stories or acts that take place during a particular time period overnight on Earth.
Right.
In different parts around the world. And I really enjoy that kind of storytelling in terms of, temporal setting. And we have something at least somewhat similar going on here because it says things occur in each of these stories or acts over a 20-minute period with some of these kind of overlapping. So maybe, I guess, overlapping by 10 minutes from going from one to the other. So that would be curious to see how Muradov handles this. Definitely want to discuss this. And then the other thing I wanted to mention, this is from Fantagraphics Underground imprint of Fantagraphics. Mike Taylor's In Christ There Is No East or West is something else that I may want to check out.
Yeah, I'm reading through that description. That sounds like it's a lot to cover in 80 pages.
Yeah, it says Mike Taylor's Soul Cry for America depicts an experimental journey as a modern-day Virgil traverses the gasping and confusing psychological landscape of right now. That sounds interesting. I think, but the fact that it's a Fantagraphics Underground title, or as Gary Groth called it on an episode where I interviewed him earlier this year, an FU title.
Right.
I've been impressed with what I've seen with Fantagraphics Underground titles. Miriam Lebicki's Tour de Hot Jew we actually had Miriam on the show to discuss that. And then, recently we had Noah Van Sciver's, I guess, sketchbook Constant Companion. Right. But even more impressive, I think, in terms of a Fantagraphics Underground title is one of my 10 favorites from last year. And that's John Hankiewicz's Education, which I thought was a phenomenal text.
Yeah, I haven't read that. I remember you talking about it because I remember it from your 10 best episode. So I need to read, especially since I'm in education.
Yeah. There you go. It's imperative.
That's right. I should have read it already. Speaking of, do we have any more Fantagraphics titles to talk about?
I don't.
Okay. Well, then let's jump down to page 302. I think we both highlighted First Second Science Comics. That's
Polar Bears.
Polar Bears, that's right. The Survival on the Ice, which I think I've read every entry in this series so far because I actually teach a content area literacy class for science teachers. So I make it my business to read the science comics, and all of the titles in that series they've been excellent. They cover a wide array of science. There's biology, there's history, there's even some chemistry and some things in there. And I'm kind of intrigued just to kind of learn about, polar bear biology and behavior. And I think I imagine, like it says at the end, about them striving in a landscape that is rapidly changing. There's also going to be a strong component about ecology and kind of the environment. So I'm thinking, I'm impressed with these series because they seem conceived in a very holistic way. When they say science, it's like, I often joke with my classes that, science in comics is generally like not discussed in ways that connect logically. Mm-hmm. Like, Reed Richards can invent clothing and travel through dimensions and, create cures for, like, he's a chemist, a biologist, like he's an expert in every field that exists. But doesn't talk about how the synergy of how science actually works. And I think that these books do that. They talk about how, ecology and biology and chemistry and all those things kind of tie together in ways that I think is important for young readers especially, but I think they're rewarding for adults as well, because I learn a lot reading these books.
Yeah, they're really well made and well told, and not just for younger readers. I know that when Gwen and I last year, almost exactly a year ago, I guess, had Andy Hirsch on for his science comics book on dogs.
That was a great book.
It was. We both, Gwen and I, commented on the fact that, especially when Andy got into the weeds with DNA, we found it challenging. So it definitely isn't dumbed down comics in order to teach kids about, or younger readers about, science, because there's some sophisticated things going on.
Oh, yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Now, right above that is, on the same page, 302, is something that I'm interested in, and this is Dame Darcy's Hijacks and Hijinks, Life's a Pitch, and Then You Live Forever. And are you a fan of Dame Darcy, in particular her Meat Cake series with Fantagraphics?
I've read those. I mean, it's been a while since I read them, but I remember being intrigued and kind of, what's the word? Like, I kind of had an uneasy read. I think it made me uncomfortable in a lot but I think that's her point, is to kind of make you uncomfortable, which I appreciated it. I won't say I've sought it out much over the years, but I do think she's an excellent comics creator.
Yeah, it says that this is a black-humored, edgy social comedy based on the real-life experiences of cartoonist and musician performance artist Dame Darcy, creator of the comic series, as I mentioned, Meat Cake. Her gothic Lolita punk Dada life is in so they didn't get an editor on this solicit.
Right.
Is in a no-holds-barred fight for social justice, allying herself with witches, minority races, and the LBGTQ community, billionaires, and Native Americans. That's a quite diverse group.
Too.
Yeah. Dame Darcy takes on reality TV, self-publishing, fine art exhibition, movie production, and the patriarchy, and the soaring cost of higher education. So it seems like the entire contemporary world is packed into this text.
You talk about social commentary. This is instance 4.
Yeah, but it's 408 pages. So
yeah.
Now this is coming out from Feral House, and I know that I've seen Feral House publications before in the past. I can't remember what we may have discussed or mentioned on the show, but I'm wondering why Fantagraphics, her publisher of Meat, I was about to say Meat Puppet, but Meat Cake, is not publishing this. But I don't know.
That's a different. Meat Puppets is a different thing.
Yeah, that's music.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know why, but it's definitely something I think worth checking out.
Now, the next thing I have is on, I guess it spans pages 310 and 311. And this is from, it says that the press is Kim Weston, but the person who has written all of these reference works is Kim Weston. So I don't know if this is just something that's self-published, or if his name is his own publishing arm. But I'm not aware of this guy, but for those who are fans and especially scholars of Carl Barks, then they may want to check out on page 310 and 311 these various reference works. I think by and large reference works, because we get the second edition of the Carl Barks Index.
Right.
We also get the complete Karl Barks index that's solicited, and also another book, Restoring Karl Barks. And then on 311, the unavailable Karl Barks, and I guess that's his comics, not so much a reference work.
Right.
So apparently Kim Weston is quite a big scholar, writer when it comes to the work of Karl Barks.
Oh, yeah. And Karl Barks is, listeners should know who he is, but, he's arguably the greatest comics creator, period. Even, more than Kirby or Mobius or whoever.
The good duck artist.
The good duck artist, that's right.
Is what he was called.
Hey, we share the same birthday, so.
Oh, you and Karl Barks?
Yeah, he's a lot older than, or he would be.
Well, he's dead, so.
That's also true.
I'm hoping, yeah.
Yeah.
Now, after that, we get the Lion Forge offerings. And, more times than not, there's at least one thing in the Lion Forge section, because they offer so many things, that I would want to mention. This time around, I don't have anything, but I think you do, right?
I do. It's a series that's been ongoing. I think it's Infinity 8. I don't know if you've talked about Infinity 8 in the past. I don't recall it. But it's a series written by Louis Trondheim, who is, he's very prolific. He's a French creator, I think, and yes. he produces a lot of work. But Infinity 8's a sci-fi series. They're right now on volume 3, and currently I've only read volume 1. But from my understanding, they're 3-issue arcs, and eventually they'll be published as trades. And I think that they don't. I don't know if they directly impact each other, but they are somehow related. So
yes. Now, I'm glad that you mentioned this, because even looking at your list, I overlooked Infinity 8. That's something that I've heard nothing but great things about. And I've been meaning to read the first 2 volumes of Infinity 8, because you're right. Trondheim is the writer, but with each volume, Trondheim is working with a different artist. And I think with volume 1, his artist was Zepp. Yes. I can't remember who was the artist for the second volume.
I'm not entirely sure, but
again, another French creator. And we have with volume 3, and what's being solicited now is issue number 2 of the third volume, Fabian Vellman. And we've talked about Fabian Vellman several times on the Comics Alternative, especially the Eurocomic series. So yeah, this is something that I've been meaning to check out, but in going through the Lion Forge section, I don't know why in the hell I just overlooked that.
Hey, volume 2 was drawn by Olivier Vatine.
Okay.
So, and it's called Back to the Führer. So, if you're into sci-fi with Nazis, it's a book you might want to check out. It's a fun series. I haven't read the second volume, I must admit. It's actually not published yet until October 30th this month. The collection anyway. But I really enjoyed the first volume. It was a lot of fun. It was good sci-fi that left me uncomfortable but entertained.
Now, I think next, both of us go to the Oni Press section, right?
Yes.
And your first title of interest is?
It's actually The Long Con, Volume 1, which is it's a series that I wanted to check out, but I didn't. It's on page 326. It's kind of it sounds a lot like the I Am a Hero kind of that series that you'd mentioned. It's kind of some kind of cataclysmic event has obliterated everything. I know, easy for me to say, right? Within a 50-mile radius of the Los Spinoza Convention Center. So it sounds like basically San Diego Comic-Con's going on, something happens, and then the people in the con are the only survivors in that area. So they're kind of surviving in this post-apocalyptic landscape, but they are, stuck with comics creators and D-list celebrities, and those are the people striving to survive. I don't know. It just sounds like an intriguing setup to me. And I've read some comics. The writer is Dylan Mechanis, who may or may not be Greek. But that's
you can sniff them out, right?
Yeah, that's right. If there's an Opolis or an Is or an Akis, that's, sometimes they're Armenian or some other Baltic person, but they tend to be Greek. But yeah, it just seems like a fun setup. It's something that's intriguing to me, and I would read that book. And it's coming out in February, so I will check that out at some point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think Ben Coleman also writes along with Mekonis, and then the art is by Ia Denish. And it's not E.A. Denish, I don't think, because we don't have a period separating the E and the A, so I guess you pronounce it Ia. E-A.
Yeah, and the colorist is M. Victoria Robato.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember when these individual issues came out when they were solicited, and I thought, okay, that may be interesting. But, there's just so much to read. I didn't even think about picking it up. But now that the trade's out, it would be something worth checking out.
Yeah, and it's funny to me that the fandom is ruled by a mysterious figure known as, quote, the special guest. Mm-hmm. It seems fun in a lot of ways.
Mm. Now, in the Oni section, I go to page 330. Do you have anything before that?
I don't think so.
Okay. On 330, we get, I'm guessing this is an original graphic novel. I don't remember seeing this anywhere before, at least in individual issues. And this is written by Macon Blair with art by Joe Flood. Mm-hmm. Long Road to Liquor City.
Oh, yeah. I highlighted this one, too. This looks like a lot of fun.
Yeah. It says, it's from filmmaker Macon Blair. I didn't know his films. It says it's a Great Depression-era adventure comedy about love, friendship, and the pursuit of happiness. As jaunty hobos Jed and Fanny, and by the way, you have jaunty hobos, you have a great story, right?
Oh, yeah.
They crisscross the country in search of the fabled Liquor City. So I guess this is like Big Rock Candy Mountain, where they are pursued relentlessly by fearsome rail yard sergeant Ronan O'Feathers, who wrongly blames them for his wife's death. Mm-hmm. So this seems like a fun story. I would be willing to check it out. And then the Flood's art, we get a page on 331 of, I guess, 4 pages, so it's kind of small, of his sample art, and it looks good. I'm definitely on board for this.
Oh yeah, that title is one I'd like to check out. I mean, I don't know Macon Blair by name, but I have seen I Don't Feel at Home in This World Anymore, and it's a crazy movie that I wasn't allowed to pick the movie for a little while after that with my wife after we watched it. But it's about a woman played by Melanie Linsky who's her apartment is burglarized, and she's kind of got this weird, quirky neighbor who's played by Elijah Wood, they have a strange relationship that's very utilitarian, but she decides that she's going to go out and make the world a better place her own way, and pursue the thieves, and things happen. Like, a lot of things happen. It goes off to say it goes off the rails. I mean, it goes off of a bunch of different rails. So, if that's any indication of how the narrative's going to go in this book, I'm in for that. Is that movie, it's like what a movie should do. It should unsettle you and entertain you and surprise you, and it did all those. So, and this has got hobos, and like you said, jaunty hobos at that.
Yeah. Now, the only other thing I have in Oni is on page 333, and this is the Omnibus edition of Bram Revel's Gorillas. Mm-hmm. So this is 744 pages that'll be coming out in February. And, I'll admit, I wasn't aware of Revel's Gorillas before, but when I saw this, I went to look him up, and I saw that, Gorillas had come out previously, in various issues, and I think from Oni, but now we have the Omnibus edition that's going to be pulling everything together. And it says the critically acclaimed series is collected for the first time in one volume. I guess I was remiss in not knowing about this critically acclaimed series.
Hey, I did not know any of it, so you're not remiss. I'm not putting it on you.
Yeah. So yeah, it may be worth checking out.
It looks cool. I mean, anytime you give chimps and simians and primates machine guns and helmets, and cigarettes. I mean, I was surprised that they smoke as much as they do in comics. Yeah. I mean, it's not something I put on most gorillas or primates.
Yeah, the only thing that could add an additional incentive to this title is if you threw in jaunty hobos.
Jaunty hobos and gorillas let's not talk about it on the podcast. Let's talk about it off air, and that can be our $1 million idea.
That's right. Okay. I know this is your first preview show, but you're a longtime listener of the Comics Alternative, especially our preview shows. So you and all of our listeners know that at times, or I guess usually, the preview shows tend to go long, and we're definitely not disappointing you with the October preview show. I just noticed that we're about 2 hours and a little over 2 hours and 15 minutes into this episode. So we want to thank our listeners for sticking around. Actually, I had wondered at one point if these longer preview shows were prohibitive in any way. In other words, if our listeners didn't like them. Actually, according to the download numbers, on almost a consistent monthly basis, our preview shows tend to get downloaded more than other weekly review shows. So that's just one other indication that the length of a podcast episode, for instance, being shorter rather than longer, is not necessarily an indicator of the show's popularity. In fact, as the people at Libsyn, and that is our host for the podcast, keep pointing out, it is the really long podcast, or the podcast with really long episodes, that tend to be the most popular to get the most downloads, which goes against, I think, most first-time podcasters' gut instinct, because they tend to feel, or maybe they've heard mistakenly, that a podcast episode should be no longer than the average commute. So you're looking at about 30 to 20 minutes. But the statistics show that it's actually longer episodes that are most popular. And that seems to be the case with our preview shows. So we are coming into the home stretch, dear listener, but thank you for sticking with us so far for about 2 hours and right now 17 minutes.
Hey, I'm going to put on my Sally Field impersonation and be like, you love us. You really love us. That's a horrible impersonation. I apologize.
I don't know. I felt if I closed my eyes, I would see Sally Field's right there.
That's sweet.
Okay, so I think both of us go next after Oni to page 338. Is that correct?
That's right. To Trish Trash, her Omnibus by Jessica Abel.
Yeah, Trish Trash, Roller Girl. And now this originally came out in 3 volumes, correct?
Yes, you're right.
Yeah, and I think originally it appeared in French. And then the English editions came out in these larger, nice European album format, I think, volumes. Yeah. But now we get, and I think I got the first one. I don't think I went on to get the other 2. I know I haven't read them yet, but it may be worth having waited, because now you can get either the soft cover or the hardcover complete omnibus that is now solicited. So yeah.
Yeah, no, that's exactly my thinking. You got volume 1. I didn't even get volume 1. Somehow that slipped through the cracks for me. And so I'm kind of excited that there's a single volume that I can get, because I really like Jessica Abel's comics. And Roller Girl of Mars. I mean, she's not just a roller girl. She's on Mars. That's
right. I remember when we had her on the podcast to talk about that book that she did on public radio. We were asking her at one point, I think toward the end of the conversation, what she was working on next. And she had mentioned Trish Trash starting off as a French title. And then I think she said that her husband, Matt Madden, had challenged her to come up with a lot of different, almost disparate elements. And she came up with Trish Trash, Roller Girl of Mars. So, you have roller derby, you have someone named Trish Trash. It takes place on Mars. Yeah, it's a fun title.
Yeah, and they're fun. I like both of them because they're involved with the education aspect of comics too. And they're, that book, what's it called? Writing Pictures and Drawing Words. That's, I think it's like, there's 2 of them in that series, but those are some of my favorite comics or favorite books for teaching how to do comics.
Now, after that, I go to page 343. I don't think you have anything before that. And this is under Silver Sprocket, Nothing Nice to Say, written and drawn by Mitch Clem. And it says that Nothing Nice to Say analyzed all aspects of punk music and culture with an atypical, lighthearted, and satirical sense of humor from 2002 to 2014, amassing a dedicated fan base as one of the most popular webcomics of its time. Here's the complete definitive collection of all things. NN25. Or 2S, like Nothing Nice to Say.
Right.
I'm not familiar with this webcomic, but I have been interested in the things that Silver Sprocket has been coming out with over the past year or so. Mm-hmm. And in fact, when I was at SPX a couple of weekends ago, I did talk with someone at Silver Sprocket about the possibility of us doing a publisher spotlight on Silver Sprocket in the not too distant future, maybe into early 2019. And maybe then we can do what we did with, let's say, early this year. Kush is look at the previous year's releases. So it's entirely possible that we could do a publisher spotlight on Silver Sprocket releases from 2018 at the very beginning of 2019, if you'd be up for it.
Yeah, I've read, I think they put out a Be Your Own Backing Band. I think Liz Prince put out a collection of strips. I love Liz Prince. So, I've seen a couple of their titles. They look really cool. Mm-hmm. I like that intersection between comics and kind of music that they kind of, it's kind of their niche, it seems like.
Right. After that, I go to page 345, and this is under Sourcebooks, the publisher, and the title is Illegal, written by Ian Colfer and Andrew Donkin, with art by Giovanni Regano.
His name is Owen. I learned this.
Oh, that's how you pronounce Eoin?
Yep, Owen.
Okay, there you go. Thank you for correcting me on that. And, I've mentioned a couple of times things about immigration and whatnot. Well, this is yet another text that deals with that. It says a powerful moving graphic novel by New York Times bestselling author Ewan Colfer that explores Ewan, right?
Yeah, Owen.
Owen. Okay, Owen. That explores the plight of undocumented immigrants. Ebo is alone. His brother, Kwame, has disappeared, and Ebo knows it can only be to attempt the hazardous journey to Europe and a better life, the same journey their sister set out on months ago. But Ebo refuses to be left behind in Ghana. He sets out after Kwame and joins him on the quest to reach Europe. And so this is apparently some kind of epic journey that has everything to do with immigration and being illegal in some nations. So, yeah, rather timely, and I think it's worth checking out.
This is I didn't note this one because I thought it had already come out. I literally just looked over it. And the reason why I know his name is Owen is because I have a blog called Graphic Novel Resources where I review graphic novels, and this is one I put up, I think, last month because this was originally solicited to come out. So I've read this book. I have a preview copy that came to I work here with the UT with the Children's for Young Adults the Center for Children's and Young Adult Literature, and this is one of the preview copies that we got. And it's I've read the whole book. It's a hard book to read in a lot of ways. And it's exactly like you say. It's kind of got dual narratives. One is him escaping from Ghana, and the other one is him trying to get to Europe. And I mean, to say that horrible things happen is an understatement. It's very difficult for them, and it's a difficult read. So I've actually read this book. It's beautiful. I love this book, and it's everything you said it is. It's topical. It's about things that are happening right now. And from what I gathered. From looking at reviews and things, it's not truth. I mean, it's not a piece of nonfiction, but it's strikingly similar to a lot of people's experiences. So I love this book. I'm just going to say that.
Now, on that next page it's something from a publisher I'm not familiar with, Starburns Industries Press. And the title is Phantasmagoria Holiday Special 2018. So just in time for Christmas, it says, it's your favorite quarterly horror anthology based on real folklore from Mexico and the American Southwest. And I wasn't familiar with this title of Phantasmagoria. Were you?
No, I've never heard of it, but it looks totally awesome.
Yeah. So I guess this is an anthology of stories. We don't have any of the creators' names here, but it looks fascinating. And if you're looking for something to read and possibly for us to discuss in a upcoming holiday episode later into summer, this may be something worth checking out.
This looks like it works for Christmas and Halloween.
Yeah, it can go either way. Although, it won't be coming out for a while.
Right.
Now, I think you do have something in the Titan section, right?
I do. I have this is a weird thing in that this is the second trade or from this character called Tyler Cross.
Right.
Written by Fabian Nuri and drawn by Bruno. Mm-hmm. The first trade, I think it's published tomorrow, and I should be getting my hands on it very soon.
Black Cross.
But I haven't read it. But Tyler,
no, Black not Black Cross, but Black Road, I think.
Something like that. And this is a series
Black Rock, yes, Black Rock.
This is a series that I haven't read it, but it's like you said, like we talked about before. You know, it's a noir series. It's set in the 1950s. It's like a gangster thriller. This one, in this particular one, he has been arrested and he's going to break out of jail. Which, you know, that's something that I always think is interesting. And you know, it's cross-published with Hard Case Crime, which is I've read a lot of their novels. I like their books a lot. They're kind of like the throwbacks to you know, older noir kind of stories. And there's some contemporary art authors that they publish, and then there's some historical ones that they publish. So I saw this book in Europe. I was in Amsterdam, and I saw it on a bookshelf, and it just looks gorgeous. I couldn't understand it because I don't read in Dutch, but I loved it on art alone. So I'm really looking forward to this volume, and actually the first volume, which is just coming out now.
Yeah, and actually, these have been available, these two titles, Black Rock and then Angola, the Tyler Cross texts, for English readers for a while now, but not in print format, because maybe it was about 2 years ago, Edward, who at the time was doing the Euro Comics Monthly show with me, and I actually discussed Tyler Cross Black Rock.
Okay.
That, as you mentioned, is about to come out. And but we got it through the publisher Europe Comics, which only does digital translations. And so that's what we had our hands on. So we were discussing this, and I think at the time that we were discussing it, a digital version, again through Europe Comics, of Angola was just being released. And so I was able to read that as well. And so when I saw a few months ago Tyler Cross Black Rock being solicited, it's like, well, I've already read it, but it's good to see that it's coming out in print. Same thing with now Angola that is currently being solicited. And you're right, this is part of Titan's Hard Case Crime series. Now, when you talk about the books, were you referring to the prose Hard Case Crime and the comics version of that?
A little of both, because as a prose imprint, I think they've been around since, I want to say, 2002 or 2003, and I've read a lot of their prose books, but I've also picked up some of the comics, and I've liked some. I mean, they're kind of a mixed bag for me, because a lot of them kind of read like movie scripts that just end up in comic format, and I think Walter Hill, the producer or the director Walter Hill, wrote 2 of the early series that I remember reading. I think The Professional, and one was about, I mean, it was called The Hitman or something like that, because it was about a hitman. But I really liked the way that they look, because they have that kind of Euro comics feel,
right,
visually.
And some were actually originally published.
Yes.
You know, in Europe.
That's correct.
In France, yeah.
And I really liked what was it called? I just read. There's one in the 70s written by Krista Faust I really liked.
Oh yeah, Peep Show.
Yes. I like Peep Show, and there's another one that Megan Abbott did one too that I love Megan Abbott as a noir, as a writer, and she did one that was set in the 1970s where everyone looks like they're a movie star, like you would know who they are visually. It's kind of like this. Oh, I'll remember in a second what it's called, but it's a book about like a woman who becomes involved in illegal, I guess it's a prostitution ring in Washington D.C. and like a very, I don't know. It's a comic though, and I really enjoyed reading that one.
Well, one of the reasons why I was asking for a differentiation between the prose, hard case crime, and the comics is because on the page before that is a solicit for the first issue of the next series of comics within the hard case crime series, and that is Breakneck. And this is written by Dwayne Scherzinski and several other artists. So this strikes me as something that, given the name of the artists, may have originally appeared in another language other than English, but is being translated. I don't know.
Yeah, and I'm not sure. The book I was thinking about was called Normandy Gold. That was what
Normandy Gold. Yeah. In fact, that was just concluded earlier this year, right? Right.
And I just read the trade of that, and I think there was just a Minky Woodcock. It was I just read that one too. That one's it's a murder mystery set around involving Houdini. What the woman who handcuffed Houdini.
Yeah,
I've read that one too. I like the books. They're visually striking, and the stories for the most part I can get behind.
Right. Now, also in the Titan section, and I think this is the last Titan title that I wanted to highlight for this month. This is on page 354, and it is Philippe Druillet's The Night, or in French, La Nuit. We've discussed Druillet in the past on the Comics Alternative. Great writer and artist. I think Gene and I believe, discussed the first book in his Lone Sloan series. But this seems really interesting. It says, born from a personal tragedy, The Night is the darkest, most explosive work of comics legend Philippe Druillet. It takes place in a ragged world of nihilistic anarchy, drug-addicted bikers, and barbarians who race toward the ultimate madness of their end. And the cover is quite striking.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So I would like to get that or check that out. And in the comics section proper, before we get to the manga, even though we know that manga is nothing more than Japanese comics.
That's right.
I only have one other thing, and this is on page 371. Do you have anything else before the manga section?
I do not.
Okay. If you go to 371, you'll see something I thought was a little unusual. This is from Vanguard Productions. And Vanguard, over the past several years, has been coming out with these nice collections of works, usually genre-based, from Wally Wood. And we even have, again under Vanguard Productions, some of Wally Wood's Daredevil Aces comics that are being collected. But to me, what really caught my attention was the Wally Wood Christmas book. I did not, it's listed here as an art book, but I did not know that Wally Wood did a Christmas book.
Huh. That's interesting. It's only 32 pages. I totally glossed over it, but that is what that is.
Yeah.
That looks cool. First time ever published.
Mm-hmm.
All ages. On all ages Wally Wood comic. Who knew?
Yeah, go figure, yeah. So now we get to the manga section of the October Previews catalog, and I don't have anything until we get to the Viz Media part. And usually Viz Media for me is kind of one of the go-to publishers for manga. I know they do a lot of really good stuff. And I begin on page 397 with We Never Learn. And this is by Taishi Tetsui. And the solicit reads that Naruyuki Yaga comes from an impoverished family, so he's eager to secure a full scholarship to a college when he graduates high school. His principal agrees with one stipulation. He must tutor the two smartest girls at the school and make sure they get into their target colleges. Rizu is a science genius who wants to study liberal arts. Fumino is effortlessly good at literature, but math makes her head spin. Naruyuki is stuck between a rock and a hard place, but who can complain about tutoring a couple of cute girls? So as you can tell from the title, this is probably going to be a romance story where you're dealing with high school age kids and their relationships. And in fact, I noticed that several of the titles in the manga section that I wanted to highlight have this kind of romance feeling, which is interesting given the fact that it's not like I read a lot of romance manga. Every now and again I do, but it seems to be a minor theme in this month's previews catalog with the manga section, at least. So apparently this is something that had originally appeared in Weekly Shonen Jump. And I don't subscribe to Shonen Jump. I've thought about it, but as such, I don't know anything about this title other than what I just read.
Shonen Jump is like phone book size, isn't it?
Well, I don't think they do the print anymore. It used to be.
Right.
Because I used to get it for my son every month, but I know you can subscribe to the digital version, which is still a lot of reading. And I think it's that lot of reading part that makes me resist subscribing to it because I already have more than I can read right now. You know, adding that on top is going to be even more, or at least potentially, debilitating.
Yeah, and that's, I think, the thing about the publication like that there's a part of me that's enticing because it's like a whole lot of comics at once, but at the same time I kind of want to pick and choose my favorites, and I don't want to get 400 pages of something when I can just wait for the trade and read the story as I want, like what this is right here.
Yeah, exactly. So do you have anything in the manga section, in Viz in particular?
I have one in the whole manga section because I am I won't say I'm a discriminating reader all the time, but I am a overburdened reader, and I just can't keep up. But one of the things is on page 399. There's a series that I've read already, but this is a perfect edition. This is 20th Century Boys, which is written and drawn by Naoki Urasawa, who is one of the for me anyway, is one of the big creators in manga that I follow a lot of his work. I've read Monster, I've read Pluto. There's a lot of his works I've read, and 20th Century Boys is it's volume 2. This is it's a big edition, and it's a whole big chunk of comics that I really enjoyed reading. I have all I think there's 22 in the original series. I have all 22.
Yeah, they're 20 volumes of 20th Century Boys and then 2 volumes of 21st Century Boys.
That's what it is. And I really enjoyed this. It's kind of got that formula. I don't know if it's a formula, but that 7 or 8 of the issue or the volumes are in one kind of narrative, and then there's this huge disruptive event, and it turns into an entirely different series after that. And I really loved. I mean, he's one of those masters of suspense, and this one. I mean, the description says, with killer bacteria attacks on San Francisco and London underway, the plot to destroy the world that Kenji imagined as a boy is playing out in real life through the actions of the friend.
Yeah.
And that's it. I just love this series. It's this weird wistful childhood with a mystery, with this kind of weird virus, and these, I don't know, it just turns into an entirely different series, I think, because there's a big jump in time at one point, and I loved reading this, and it's, to me, it's kind of a testament to how much suspense and action he kind of built up, because I followed this whole thing and I read those other 2, and he keeps you guessing about who that friend is, and
yeah, for the longest time he does. I'm glad you brought this up, because I think it maybe 2 months ago, when the first volume of 20th Century Boys Perfect Edition was solicited, we talked a little about that. And I'm like you, I've read, and in fact, it wasn't until this year that I read all of 20th Century and then 21st Century Boys. Absolutely love it. Urasawa is one of my favorite contemporary mangaka, and I'm on board for about anything that he does. So I'm like you, I've read all of Monster, I've read all of Master Keaton, I've read Pluto, and now this year I've read 20th Century Boys. And the reason I was I think relatively late in getting to 20th Century Boys, let's say after reading all of Master Keaton, Monster, and Pluto, was for a while, I was wondering if Viz Media was going to release perfect editions of 20th Century Boys. Because I have the perfect editions of Master Keaton, the perfect editions of Monster, and, it'd be nice to be consistent and get the perfect editions of 20th Century Boys. And for those who don't know, the perfect editions that Viz Media puts out are basically two of what they include in their regular, or in this case, signature editions of their various titles. And so 2 volumes in the signature edition of 20th Century Boys would make up one perfect volume. So in volume 2, we basically have what was the original volumes 3 and 4. So I waited around. However, last year I was back in Texas visiting family, and I was in a half-price bookstore, and I saw, I think, about 3 or 4 of those signature edition 20th Century Boys looked completely unread for a really cheap price. So I got them, and I said to myself, okay, I'm going to read them in signature edition because I'm not going to wait forever for the perfect editions. And, of course, a number of months after I make that decision, what do I see? An announcement that they're going to come out with perfect editions. But I still think that I made the right decision, because if we can expect, so there's going to be, I guess, 11 perfect editions of 20th Century Boys. And if these are going to come out, let's say, every other month, then it's going to be well over a year until all the perfect editions are available. And I didn't want to wait that long. I'm glad, because once I started to read the first volume, in fact, not even the first couple of the signature editions, I was hooked. You're right. This is an incredible story. As much as I loved Monster, I think that maybe I enjoyed 20th Century Boys even more. Yeah. And what you were describing in terms of, let's say, the premise of this second perfect edition volume, I can't help but think of how we started off this episode in the image section. With the title Die, you have people get together. They had an event that happened to them when they were kids, and then years later when they're adults, they get back together to try to deal with whatever it was that happened to them as kids. Something very similar, if you recall, is going on in 20th Century Boys.
Yeah, it's a great callback. Hadn't even occurred to me, but and I think I agree with you. I read Monster. There were a couple issues or a couple volumes in the middle where it felt like he was kind of treading water a little bit. The story wasn't quite going, to the speed that this one did. There's so much going on in 20th Century Boys that I love. Oh yeah, yeah.
Also on that page is something else that I'm interested in, and this is Abara. It's the complete deluxe edition, and this is by Tsutomu Nihei. Vast city lies under the shadow of a colossal ancient tombs, the identity of their builders lost to time. In the streets of the city, something is preying on the inhabitants, something that moves faster than the human eye can see and leaves unimaginable horror in its wake. And so that's part of the solicit that we have for Abara. I hadn't heard of this before, and I don't think in fact, I know I haven't read anything by Nihei. And this may be something to check out and perhaps even discuss on an upcoming manga episode.
It looks fascinating. I agree. And one of the things that appeals to me about manga is, you get these comprehensive, it's kind of like Omnibuy in the Western comics, but you get these, or Western, American comics. But here you get this, I don't know, it's a big chunk of comics. If it's something that, if it's a story that you love and you can kind of latch onto, I'm all for getting it in one big old piece. I like that.
Yes, what I prefer. Now, if you go down a few pages to 402, and this is in the Yen Press section of the manga part of the catalog, Mirai, Mirai. This is by Mamoru Hosoda. I don't know if I'll get this, but I saw the cover image and I read the description, and it just seemed to me that, again, Gwen, if you're listening to this, Crystal, if you're listening to this may be something that you want to consider for a young readers show, because the ages for this title is teen or ages 13 and up. And it does have that look that this is a manga that is going to be very appropriate for younger readers. And, Lord knows you can't say that about a lot of manga.
That's true.
whether it comes to the female form or otherwise. But this looks like it's something that is written for young readers.
Yeah.
And it's also interesting in that we rarely mention anything on these preview shows from Yen Press.
Yeah, and that's I think they put out the books by Svetlana Chimakova. Is that right? Am I thinking of Zen Press? I might be thinking of Zen Press. But
Yen, Zen.
Hey,
phonetically, you get them mixed up.
I know, it's horrible. But yeah, this looks fascinating, and I like that there's a little time travel element to this too. It's one of those. I don't know if we described it, but I don't recall. But it's one of those things that, there's a baby sister and then a sister from the future. That's pretty cool. That's a pretty cool twist on family relationships, I think.
Yeah.
I might read this now that you brought it up. You're spending my money, Derek. This is horrible or wonderful.
That's why we do these shows, so we can go broke. Now, I next go to page 408, and this is in the Denpa Books section. I didn't even know about Denpa until I think it was last month. There was one of the titles that they had that seemed really interesting. And the thing about Denpa, from what I can gather, is that they're dealing with, I guess, what you could roughly call alternative manga, but contemporary stuff, right? So not anything by, let's say, the Gekiga Masters from the 1960s into the 70s. But this is different. And the title on page 408 that got my attention is An Invitation from a Crab. And the creator, both artist and writer for this, is Pampanya. And the way that Pampanya is spelled out, it's all small letters. And so I'm assuming that the person who laid everything out in this catalog got it right. And Pampanya has some kind of E.E. Cummings kind of thing going, right? Where only small case letters are used in the name. But the description's fascinating. If you are ever fortunate enough to see a crab strolling through your neighborhood, please follow its lead. By slowing down to a crab's pace and looking around and about in the world, you too may discover life's many mysteries that are hidden in plain sight. This English language debut from artist Pampanya collects 18 short stories detailing the comical, creepy, and whimsical world of Japan's indie comic scene.
That sounds like there's a lot going on there.
Yeah. So I'm probably going to get that one. And then on page 414, and this is in the Kodansha section. And Kodansha, kind of like Viz Media, is another one of those go-to publishers for manga that I read a lot of. This is at the top of the page. This is Quintessential Quintuplets, both written and drawn by Negi Haruba. And it is, according to the description, as I mentioned earlier, a high school romantic comedy with 5 times the cute girls. A high school boy must work part-time to help 5 sisters study so they can graduate, but the only thing these quintuplets have in common is that they all hate studying. Okay, so you have something very similar to what I described with We Never Learn. The tutoring, the high school, the romance. Coincidence? I don't know.
They got your number. That's what I think it is.
Yeah. On page 315. I'm sorry. 416. 416. I can't even read. There is another title. I was intrigued by.
Oh, yeah.
The title.
This one jumps out at you.
Yeah. And I think this is a 7 Seas Entertainment book. I Want to Eat Your Pancreas, Volume 1. It's written by Yoru Semino and with art by Lundra. It's one word. Or Iundra. I guess that's an I. Oundraw. And it says this is the manga version of the coming-of-age tearjerker that inspired 2 films. And I don't know anything about the films. Also known as Let Me Eat Your Pancreas. This deeply moving first-person story is about a high school boy, again the high school, who finds the diary of his classmate and discovers that she's dying. Okay, so you got the romance part. So this must be a theme in the manga section for this month. Either that or a very curious coincidence.
This has got some graphic manga, or not graphic, maybe it's manga medicine instead of graphic medicine kind of elements going too. That's That's a thing.
Mm.
I mean, this is, I don't know what it sounds, this is very intriguing. Like this is not your typical title.
Right.
I definitely would check this out just out of curiosity factor.
Yeah. Yeah. For the title alone.
Oh yeah. I want to eat your let me eat your I mean, either title really is intriguing. I get why they went with I want to eat your pancreas, but that kind of sounds like a 60s horror movie.
Yeah. Yeah. And my last selection in the manga section and in the catalog as a whole is on page 419. Mm-hmm. And this is in the Vertigo comics section. Vertigo does a lot of interesting things.
Yeah.
And this is Pop Team Epic second season. And I wanted to mention this for a couple of reasons. One, Shay and I don't know, it may not be until our November show. I think we're going to discuss the first volume of Pop Team Epic. Mm-hmm. But it's also worth mentioning in that, as you can see on the cover of this, what they call the second season of Pop Team Epic, and you have the same thing going on with the first volume, you have these two young girls, very chibi looking, who are holding up hands, both of their hands, flipping the bird.
Oh, yeah.
And I just several days ago, I got a review copy of the first volume of Pop Team Epic from Vertigo. Thank you, Vertigo. And it is, as the description mentions here, a series of almost gag strips, like maybe 6-panel, perhaps 4-panel at times, strips, but they have a kind of surreal, even absurdist feel to them. And that's what you have. It says a bizarre 4-panel manga that, of course, sometimes it's more than 4-panel, centers around two 14-year-old girls, Papuko and Pipimi. Don't be fooled by their cute appearances, though. This is exclamation marks.
Oh, yeah. Manga.
Follow the daily adventures of Papuko and Pipimi in this gag manga that parodies the manga and other manga and pop culture. So it looks fun. I haven't read my copy of the first volume. I've looked through it, and it does whet my appetite. I can't wait to discuss this on the manga series.
It looks a little reminiscent of, Crayon Shin-Chin. Maybe the art style a little bit, or maybe the top. I don't know if you ever read that one.
I did not.
It's another one of these kind of style. Like he's very cute, or he looks very cute, but he's like a nasty little boy. But it was funny. That's what I remember. Too. There was a lot of pee-pee humor. That's what I remember. And Papuko and Papini.
Yeah. Well, there you go. An almost extra long episode of the Comics Alternative, our look at the October Previews catalog. And, as we pointed out at the top of the show, many times our preview shows go a little longer, and this was your first. Mm-hmm. So, Serge, consider this your trial by fire.
Hey, this is, if I get a reward, I want you to look on, I forget which page it's on, but there is a Shakespeare bust that looks like I can summon the Batcave from it.
Oh, that's right.
It's a bank,
I saw that. Yeah.
But if prizes are being given out, that's the one I want.
Okay, I'll look at our bank account and see what we have.
There you go. Shakespeare busts for everyone.
Yes. But yeah, we always have a good time going through the previews catalog, sometimes longer episodes, sometimes not as long. But it's fun going through in a wish list fashion, right? Things that we would like to get or we would recommend to others. And even though, as Serge pointed out at the beginning of this episode, the October listings aren't yet, as we record this, available on Discount Comic Book Services website, you can wait 2 or 3 days, and rest assured you will find, I think, every single thing that we've mentioned on this preview show at really incredible discounts at dcbservice.com. Remember, they'll take care of all of your comics pre-ordering needs. That's Discount Comic Book Service. Go to dcbservice.com. They'll take care of you.
That's right. And tell them the two guys sent you.
That's right. The two guys with PhDs sent you. By the way, and we don't just say that lightly. It is a good idea. And on our front page, we do provide a link. If you just click on that little envelope symbol, then your email browser will come up and you can quickly and easily send an email to Discount Comic Book Services customer service folk. And we even include the subject heading. The two guys with PhDs sent you. And it does help us, and it goes a long way when you get something from DCB Service, whether it be one book, whether it be bundles, whether it be hundreds of dollars of comics, just send them an email and say, hey, the two guys with PhDs sent me.
That's right. Help us all out.
And if you want to get in touch with us about the things that we discussed on this week's episode, the October Previews catalog, then go to our website, comicsalternative.com, and there you can find that you can leave us a voice message online via SpeakPipe. Or you can contact us the old-fashioned way by picking up your phone and dialing 4153-COMICS. That's 415-326-6427.
Or you can email us at twoguys@comicsalternative.com, or you can just email me at Sterg at comicsalternative.com.
Or me, Derek, at comicsalternative.com. You can also find us all over social media. We have accounts on Twitter, Facebook, Tumblr, Instagram, Google+, Goodreads, Pinterest, YouTube, Slack, and Discord. You can subscribe to the podcast through Apple Podcasts. You can stream us on Stitcher. You can also find us on Spotify, on Google Podcasts, on TuneIn, and on iHeartRadio. But you can find every single one of our podcast episodes, as well as the reviews and comics-related commentary that we post on our blog, simply by going to our website, comicsalternative.com.
That's exciting.
Yeah, and we do like to hear from you, so do get in touch with us in some way. And who knows, we may even share your comments on the air.
We might even play fanfare for you.
That's right. Get that going. But we will be back next week with another regular review show where we'll look at 3 titles. So check back with us then. Until then, I'm Derek.
And I'm Sterg.
Take care.
You take care.
Hey, what happened?